Now
Do
we got black.
do 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 do. Ta-da! Okay,
Hey,
I had my one thing messed up, but what's new? Like we were saying.
yeah,
All right, so we'll wait until people are like, "Hey, we hear you and see you," and then we can go ahead.
I see me. The lag is pretty significant, but
Yeah, it's even though I have it set up, it's probably 30 seconds.
it's about 10.
Oh, okay, that's not that bad. So we'll wait. Hey, we hear you. Good. That's fantastic. All right, we'll wait a little bit. I love all these warning messages from YouTube. Welcome to live chat. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. Blah, blah, all this stuff. It's like,
Don't want to
please,
get canceled.
yes, please don't go on the offensive and get everybody banned off YouTube. All right, so I guess we will start and we'll introduce you as Ryan Hoffman of Jolt Systems. Hi. Hi, Ryan. Everyone say hi to Ryan. My wife is in the chat and she says, I'm here to annoy Matt Happel. What's new? No. I'm pretty sure my life is annoying her. Blame the crickets, everybody says. Yes. So this is Ryan Hoffman of Jolt Systems. You want to introduce yourself and what you do before I start talking too much?
Sure. So Ryan Hoffman, Jolt Systems. Jolt Systems is a brand I've been building for probably 6, 7 years. Started just like anything does. I mean, you do some work for your buddy, and then you do it for your friend's friend, and it just took off from there. So started um, wiring cars in college. I got bit with the speed bug in high school and had a couple of Camaros through high school and college. I got tied up with the drag racers in the Cedar Rapids area here in Iowa um, in my college years and wired my buddy's car for a case of beer or whatever it was in college, and then turned into another car, and it's just expanded from there. So what I specialize in is engine management and wiring systems for drag cars. So mostly no time, heads up, no prep cars are the kind of stuff that I'm seeing go through here. Um, but most of our systems are mail order. So I'll build a custom harness to spec for like the specific input outputs and what it needs depending on what the car is, and a switch panel to match the system and make it plug and play as possible, and then send it out for the customer to install. But we've got cars in here too. Um, a lot of it to this point has been kind of experimenting and doing a lot of trial and error, and um, I've gotten a lot of opportunities to try some cool stuff. You figure it out as you go, and uh, try to learn from everyone, and it's got me to from zero to wherever I'm at now.
So that's interesting. Do you do more mail order than you do in person, you would say?
Oh yeah, very much. So I mean, it's probably 90% mail order.
Oh wow, because my other two wiring buddies that were on, they do all in person mostly. I think Devin does injector harnesses for methanol cars because they're so specific and not getting damaged because of all of the methanol fuel or whatever. But
Yep.
as far as like an entire plug and play management and switch panel and everything else, I don't think they do that at all. So that's pretty interesting. So you do? I know you sell stock computer harnesses. You said I think I saw on your site that you do like Haltech and Holly and some other stuff.
Yeah. So um, when it all, I mean, at the very beginning, I cut my teeth on nitrous cars. And started in drag racing stuff. And then when I kind of like, hey, let's turn this into a business. We got something here. Um, we kind of, me and a friend that was kind of helping me get off the ground, we just kind of looked into it from a product standpoint, and um, started doing stuff for stock ECUs. Yeah, and um, that worked for a little while. but I'm actually trying to get away from the stock ECU stuff. I mean, I'll do it as it's necessary. I think it still has its place. A stock ECU does, but I've actually phased out a lot of that stuff. I had a stack of about 50 of the red blue 411 ECU connectors for those harnesses, and I made the decision like once these are gone, I'm done. Um, and I actually just got rid of the last set of those last week, but I'm gonna have to reorder more of those because I've started doing some piggyback stuff. So I think I'm done with the stock standalone stuff except for niche situations where it's necessary. But um, I'm doing a little bit of piggyback stuff with F bodies, and that's been rapidly taking off. We can get more into that later.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest questions because that's how I was introduced to you.
Yes, that's right.
So we're gonna go over that big time. So yes, you could probably. You said you have the chat open.
I do. I haven't been paying attention
You
to it,
can
but
see Mark here goes nitrous cars. So wire nuts and vampire splices.
but yeah, and that is it's so true. I
Cliche.
it is
Stereotypes exist for a reason. Me and Cameron always say.
it's yeah it's I've yeah, that was one of the cars when I was still working out of a little two stall garage at my house. Um, a friend of mine from the Des Moines area, he called me up and was like, "Hey, um, I've got my buddy's car here, and we just put a NMS 1000 nitrous controller in it, and there's some stuff that's not quite right, and so I'd like to just buzz the car over to you. We want to go to this track this weekend, so if I think it'll take you just like an hour or two. If you can knock that out, um, and just help us get this sorted out, that'd be great." And so he brings a car over, and I mean, like big cube, small block Ford nitrous car. I mean, a healthy, heavy hitter of a car. And yeah, and there's literally wire nuts everywhere, and it's like Home Depot trailer wire that went from red to blue to yellow to red again through like four different splices, lots of soldering in there. And so I'm like, I took one look at the car. I'm like,
Nope.
we have some things to address, and so it turned into a what was going to be 2 hours into about 10 of an all nighter, and got it handled. But yeah, nitrous cars, I don't know what it is, but yeah, there's some sketchy stuff that goes on in them particularly.
All right, I was muting there because my keyboard is so. Finally, I got the YouTube live notification. Man, that was late. I'm glad I didn't wait for that.
Huh.
Whew, finally got the email. Usually it happens like 2 seconds after I connect. Yeah, here's a good one. People are starting to ask now. So, we went over so much about Jolt. I had like 3 questions about it, but you covered all the bases. So, the question I always like to ask is, how did you hear about sloppy mechanics, and what is your take on how it affects good or bad the industry or the hobby or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna be 100% honest. When I first heard of you, I mean, I think you were just starting out. I was kind of like, no, um, but like I and I was surprised when I went looking for these questions, and you added the groups. Then I got to know you as a person and see more of what you were actually doing. And again, I was surprised to see that I haven't been part of these groups. And so I actually tried to join a lot of them just in the past few days and to try to catch up. But um, seeing a lot of what you've been doing lately, I've seen a lot of growth from what you're doing, and I think you're doing good things. I mean, it's I mean, because when it all started, it was all about, I mean, just making good power on a budget and not spending money where you didn't have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've from what I've seen just recently, I've tried to catch up on your YouTube channel, and I think you're doing good things. I mean, a lot of, especially in the drag racing community, I think a lot of these brands and companies have kind of come up from grassroots uh, beginnings and just small operations, and it's good for the sport. It's good for the industry, and uh, yeah, I think from because when I first heard of you and why I didn't really jump on the wagon is just I thought it was like a lot of just rigging things and half-assing, but just seeing more of what you're doing, I admit that I was wrong. And
In the beginning, that's exactly what it was. So
yeah,
yeah, the
and
growth
there's
has
people,
been quite a bit, but we unintentionally made some stuff make power and reliable, and we went from there. So now we're
and that's
stuck.
and that's a great thing. But I mean, I think there's people out there that use sloppy as a novelty of their build and try to do things like visibly sloppy to like get attention or to have it be like a theme of their build,
Yeah,
and
I almost
that's
regret
dangerous.
the name some days, but it's such a brand anymore. If you care to call it that, I can't change it now. But yeah, a lot of people join and they have no idea. Increasingly, the membership amount of people that are in there, I'm not saying they have to know who I am and watch everything, but they have no clue who I am. They have no clue there's a YouTube page, all of the things. So they join for like the memes, and then they're like, "Look how unsafe I made this!" Like they have like they tried to make their own ladder bar, and it's cold welded, and we're like, okay, like I can't go back and call it economically fast mechanics
No.
or something like that. So it is what it is, and yeah, I think some people, and that's the response I get from most people is they don't like that it semi promotes making things unsafe, but they do appreciate it once they realize. Because that's why Jamie and I made that video a long time ago, and I think we should make another. But yeah, I mean, my biggest thing was no one would share any good info. And if they said they had good info, most of the time they were lying. So I didn't mind. I had nothing to lose, so I didn't mind making myself look like an ass and giving away good or bad as I did it. Doesn't matter if it was right or wrong. It was, did I get a good result or did I get a bad result? And because of that, I learned a lot from people, just showing them what I did. And they're like, that's wrong. And I'm like, well, show me how to do it right. And then it turns out they were wrong also. So
Mm.
that's why, I like, it might seem like super annoying that I challenge everybody, but I'm like, well, teach me how in a way that I can understand, or else you don't understand it either. So,
Well, yeah, and I think you're methodical about it, and that is good. And you're not, again, you're not out there just for the clickbait of like, let's see how sketchy we can do this. I mean, you're you've been, I mean, I like some of the cylinder head tests I've seen you do and mess with. I mean, you get results and you learn from them and you present them, and so it's good data.
what I like seeing is Holdener has like most of the same results I do. That's why I like when he says he's gonna do a test, and I'm like, I think I know what's gonna happen, and then it happens, and I'm like, hell yes, I've been saying that forever. No one cares if I say it. Well, a small percentage do, but then Holdener does it, and they're all like, wow, that's incredible, and I'm like, it is. At least you guys
Yeah,
listen to him. I don't care.
yeah.
All right, so that's a good one. I always like to ask. Almost everybody answers the same thing. Even my buddy Cameron Powers, uh, joined or heard of Sloppy and was like, "This guy is a moron." Like, that was his first initial reaction. Was like, "Who the hell is this guy reusing head bolts and head gaskets? Who would ever say that?" Like, yeah. All right. Uh this question is, tell us like the cheapest or smallest job or product you offer or do, and then on the other end tell us like the most expensive and largest thing you guys offer, if
Oh
that's a
wow.
possible answer.
Um, yeah. So
Do you
I
sell like a
have.
pencil or a pen?
I don't have those listed on the site. No, you might get a Jolt koozie. But gosh, I don't know. The one thing that I've been figuring out and trying to work through, and it's interesting, like you said with Devin and Troy, how they are doing mostly in-house installs. That's kind of where I started, and really, I've learned a lot about just, and it's crazy to see how far I've come, and really, there's, I mean, not to say I'm even that far, but Like I started out wanting to just wire cars and do the baddest of the bad and touch everything and it's big jobs like that that are hard to be sustainable and to account for all the time that goes in. And so over the past year and a half or so, I've been trying to get more to a product driven setup. So even like the mail order stuff I was doing was big complicated harnesses that um, I try to integrate everything into and have to answer 50 questions just to spec it out and get it built, and then another 50 to get it installed, even if they had instructions. And so I've been transitioning more to simple products. The hot seller now, I believe I'm the only one making a Bosch 210 injector harness for Holly.
Hmm. To the
And
Nippon Denso plug, to
yes,
the Holly injector breakout plug.
yep,
I would say
yeah,
no one else. I didn't know you sold that. So I'm
yeah,
glad that question came up.
yeah. So that's been a really hot one. I mean, that's $130 just to kind of stay in the same range of what Holly charges for their
Yeah,
EV1
that's
harness
right
or
there.
whatever. Um,
And it
and
probably
then
fits better because the Holly stuff sometimes is too tight.
mine are a little nicer than what Holly offers. I mean, I started doing injector harnesses because I did a Holly one and just like this is crap, and so um, built my own to a little bit of a higher standard, and and yeah, they went from there. But yeah, that's been the hot seller lately, and that's probably at the low range of what's common. If we're looking into a custom specs Dominator system, like I'll do a full integrated harness system for a race car. Like I've got one in the work for Rick over at Big Three for his Duster.
Hmm.
Um, I'm doing a setup for Matt Moore, the Moore race chassis. And so if we're doing a custom Holly harness for like a VC to engine, we've got a firewall bulkhead, disconnect in it, integrated smart coil wiring, um, a setup like that that's going to integrate with a relay system or a PDM, whatever you might be running. I mean, those start 2 grand and up. It's kind of where that goes.
Yeah,
So,
I didn't know you made those harnesses. That's cool.
oh yeah.
Uh,
So I hope that answered the question.
no, yeah, that's. I think it answers it. It's always interesting to see like what $50 item people sell or whatever that sells well, and people get to learn about it. Oh yeah, this
Yeah.
guy says Jolt's Ignition A1 harness for a LS is killer. So that's what you were talking about. Do you sell an entire smart coil setup like Devin?
Yeah. So I've got one that's kind of similar. So Devin, a lot of the stuff Devin does is with Tefzel wiring, and he's got everything shrunk in Raychem. Um, all of my stuff, I use TXL wiring and then woven loom. So it's uh, it's a step higher of what you'd get like in a Holly kit, but
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of make my stuff to be on par with the stuff that people are integrating it with, and so it
Yeah.
doesn't, but still nice. And yeah, I those have been a really popular one too, and one I'm pretty proud of. So like I again, I I did an install where I used Holly's big wire kit, and it's just like this could be better, and so I did it better, and that's one thing with those IGN 1A coils. They've got very specific power and grounding requirements, especially if you're going to run them at full tilt on like a methanol car. And so
I
my
think that's
setup,
why so many people make that custom harness because it
yeah,
has to be perfect or else you don't get the result you want out of those at all.
exactly, exactly. And so the kit that I make, it actually it's got the your bank harnesses for each bank of coils, and then I've got a Y harness with a 40 amp relay that's fused that'll go straight to your battery, so that you're isolating the coil power right to the battery, and then the relay trigger it's just on a lead that you can wire in to be disconnectable. And I just recommend to tag that into your fuel pump output off the Holly or whatever ECU you're using, and takes care of it.
Very fancy. Uh, the other one is, I think he always asks this. Complimentary pizza and ice cream question. Did you hear that in any of the
I saw somebody post it, but you're gonna have to fill me in on it, I guess.
Oh, they just ask what's your favorite ice cream and what's your favorite pizza, albeit like toppings or plain or whatever.
Oh, not big on ice cream, really. I guess if I go to DQ with the kids, I'll get a mint Oreo Blizzard. Pizza, I'm a pineapple on pizza guy, so
Oh, that might get people nuts here.
grab
We'll see.
grab your torches and pitchforks, but Hawaiian, that's where I'm at.
Some people are very it's like Italians if you tell them you cut spaghetti. Oh man, they freak out. Cut it up
Yeah,
before I eat it. They're like, "Ah." Oh, this guy says ice cream pizza. That's a great answer.
uh,
That'll get people going.
yeah, I don't know about that.
This is
But yeah,
potato. What's
70
that?
Z28. Thank you. Glad you like the harness.
Oh yeah, yeah. He has products from you. Well, you said a lot of your friends will probably join and troll.
That's kind of what it looked like because that's one thing that I found with this has been pretty cool. I mean, just getting into more of the simple products that just kind of flow and get ordered and pushed out, and I mean that's necessary for just cash flow and running a business. But like where I was doing products that had a lot of consulting work up
Yeah.
front and working through that, it's been pretty cool where most of my customers I consider friends and I still talk with regularly, and it's cool to see the relationships that I've built just from doing this stuff. So
And a good one. This potato R33 guy asks the best questions. He's very dynamic in his questions. If he's at the end of like one of these shows and you're like, dude, fire him off, he just starts throwing like just nails him off. It's so funny. He goes, finally, my life has been incomplete without asking ridiculous questions to very qualified individuals. What is the highest what is the highest voltage you've ever shocked yourself with? And if someone was building a sloppy style build, what product that you sell would be a good upgrade slash choice for them that isn't already on Matt's list of parts? That's a good question, actually.
highest voltage I've shocked myself with. I'm a low voltage electrician, so
Oh, wow.
I don't mess with AC. I don't touch things. I wire things that move. So I'm not a house wiring guy. That does
You're a
not cross
DC
over.
mostly, or?
Oh yeah, I'm a DC guy. So I have shocked myself with a 7AL box before on the coil discharge, so that was fun. I don't know how much voltage those are pushing, but I mean
It's probably a
it made me,
ton, but maybe not that many amps.
yeah, it made me kick my leg out straight involuntarily, but that was a long time ago.
I think everybody's rode 110 or 220 at least once if they've wired stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. I try to stay away from that. I don't mess with it, but um, uh,
Like,
I would say I don't know what is your list of parts? Do you have a list of parts of like
uh,
what's your go-to?
just from like, I think he means what people normally go through. I tried to do many different like web pages and ways to set up like commonly bought items, but then the links disappear, or if it's a whole thing of Amazon stuff, the links get changed. It's hard to keep up. I even made like an Amazon wish list and gave people a link to it and try to add stuff to it, but it's tough. Like I would give out information on like bus bars, and Blue Sea System sells a fuse panel that's nice. It has an A and a B channel. It takes 12 positions, and there's one A and one B and a ground head at the top. So what's nice is you can make one switched on and one constant on. So battery items here and ignition stuff here, and it's one panel. So if you have to have clean grounds, you can ECU ground or dirty ground at the top and shove all the grounds there, and then everything has a nice ground. And like I like stuff like that to tell people to use like certain Mac valves, all sorts of random stuff, like stuff that I've bought and used Chinese solid state relays that a lot of people hate but work great on trans brake. I wouldn't run your fan or your fuel pump with it, but stupid stuff like bumping in 3 seconds, no big deal. So I guess stuff like that. What's something you can't live without for like a build or something you use a lot? Or I would say, since it's sloppy, the most economical part that you can't live without kind of thing, if that isn't too asking too much.
No, I think a good fit would be that Bosch 210 harness. Those injector, I mean, right now with shortages and everything, those seem to be like one of the injectors you can still get really easily. They've just become a really popular economical injector. I mean, you can get them from like Carter Motorsports, Big Willie's, Lance Drager, he sells them. There's a bunch of people out there that sell those injectors, and they've become popular for a reason. So, I mean, just don't get the eBay knockoffs because you'll have problems.
Yes, of
But
course.
but yeah, I mean, that's what's made those harnesses so popular, I think.
And then another one is uh I want to get on to the piggyback stuff, but I think that's going to be a long one. So I'm going to ask these relatively simple ones first, and then we'll let you. Hopefully, you can soapbox about that for a while. Oh, so this is
I'm
a
getting
good one. You said we talked about this right before you came on the show. It says, "What are your jobs before Jolt Systems, or do you have a day job besides Jolt Systems?"
Oh, there's a story.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I was in high school trying to figure things out, I knew I didn't want just like a boring desk job, but I was on the path of engineering. Um, so spent 3 years at the community college here in Iowa, and I majored in advanced manufacturing engineering. So it was kind of a jack of all trades manufacturing program. So a lot of your engineering, math, and science with physics, statics, um, things like that. A lot of CAD design and CAD uh, operation, and then a lot of hands-on CNC operation. So got to run some CNC mills, do a lot of programming, ran a water jet, just do a lot of cool stuff. Welding, I got to do some robotic welding. So kind of all over the place.
That is quite a mix.
Yeah. So right out of college, got a job with ag equipment manufacturer, small manufacturer, and I did CAD design and engineering for them. Um, and around that time is when Jolt kind of started becoming a thing, and I started doing more work out of my own garage. Um, then went to uh, a different ag manufacturer as a tech writer, so I wrote parts manuals,
Hmm.
and um, and then that company started. So that company kind of relied on one engineer for all of their wiring and controls and stuff, and wiring and controls started becoming a bigger thing on those products, and a lot of it was outsourced, and as some of that stuff popped up where there were prototype harnesses to be built, I was kind of like, hey, this is cool, and I know like the the engineering department is really understaffed. Like this is something I could help with. Throw me in, coach. And they didn't really take me seriously, and so I was just like, okay, I'll show you what I can do. And so I jumped ship, ran Jolt for uh, a little over a year full time. Realized just how unprepared I was for it, for the day to day management and just a lot of the things that you don't think about, the boring stuff of running a business. So I got the opportunity to go back to that company right at the beginning of 2020 as kind of a wiring and controls skunk works prototype guy. So I did a lot of prototype harnesses and harness documentation, and I got to do some really cool stuff. But then kind of flipped around and things changed a little bit, and the shoe just didn't fit anymore. And so I made the choice to turn my full attention to this. So I walked away from that yesterday, and here I am.
Well, it makes sense that like you're good with wiring. You would do like the full schematic diagrams and stuff for agricultural hardware and testing and everything else.
Yeah, and that's another topic we could get into though, because it's really interesting to see like how a lot of these industries interconnect. And I mean, just like so the ag industry, they do fertilizer spreaders and salt and sand spreaders for like municipalities and stuff. But CAN bus is taking over the ag industry and standardizing things of how all different implements hook into a tractor. And so that's what a lot of the wiring and controls were on those units, is CAN based stuff. Um, and I mean, like an actual ECU is on board uh, a machine that just is literally throwing fertilizer with two spinning discs, and so
It is
it's crazy.
funny. I saw a Vice documentary on farmers because all the equipment now is so integrated. It's like having a Silverado that needs a radio, and it like theft locks you out and won't even let you use a radio and an airbag module and a body control like you can't make anything work at all. And they were actually figuring out ways to like hack that stuff, not necessarily like break into it, but reset modules and use things other than factory blah blah blah. So I would assume
Yeah,
like strange things like CAN bus translators and other things.
yeah, right to repair. Yeah, there was a full-on lawsuit going on with John Deere and with that, and I know what you're talking about. I saw a little bit on that too, and that was
Yep.
crazy because like um, representatives from Apple and Samsung and other companies like that were showing up to those trials because whatever the decision was going to be, it was going to set a precedent of these companies that own a technology. I mean, like your phone is technically not your phone, and they still have. I mean, like those companies can come in and shut your phone down or like get into it and not hack into it, but so
Yeah.
it's
Similarly,
crazy.
like, do I own my manure spreader, or does John Deere own it, or does Samsung own it? That's what most of that was about. It was pretty eye opening that all well. And then my buddy, not we're gonna side tangent a little because I just that's what I
We're getting
do.
off track pretty quick. Yeah.
My buddy who owns a farm like 10 minutes from here, they do corn mazes, and it's completely GPS driven to cut the corn maze. So he gets in and he's like, boop, and it cuts the corn maze, and he just has to make sure it doesn't drive into the road or people.
Hmm.
And he
Yeah.
just does this, and it cuts insane stuff into the cornfield. But yeah, yeah, right to repair is big shit
That,
lately. That's true. That's what
that
it's
is that's what it
called.
was.
Yep,
Yep.
right to repair. That's what Tesla is infringing on a little bit too, because
Yeah.
they don't want people to fix their stuff, which is funny because he gives out all the patents for everything, but doesn't want people to repair the cars. It's at least I haven't seen a lot of that Rich Rebuilds guy, but at least he's fighting for that. I think he clickbaits too much for me to be interested in what he's doing at all.
I agree, but yeah, he came to mind too. But yeah, when you call Tesla and you're like, "Hey, I need brake rotors for my Model 3," and they're like, "What do you need those for?"
Yeah,
And
AutoZone doesn't have them right now, so.
yeah,
Well, oh man, where what was the question? Are we done answering it now, guys?
yeah. Where are we again?
Well, all I was gonna ask then, well, we'll get to, I'd say we get to the piggy. I have two more, and then we should talk about the. Oh no, I have one more, and we should go to the piggyback stuff because that's what I'm most interested in. And I would think that when people start hearing about it, they're going to be like, "Oh wow, sick."
Yeah.
What's crazy is as soon as I started, like I was asking about what you were doing with it, and you were giving me a little bit of inside info. You had an accident at like home or something, so that kind of pushed that off a little bit.
Oh, yeah. That was a. You want to talk about that?
Well, I
Um,
mean, you can if you want to. I'm just saying
no,
that's what delayed any and all of my information about the piggyback stuff.
yeah, no, I don't mind. Yeah. So right at about a year ago, it was Memorial Day weekend. Um, so again, I was working the 9 to 5 through COVID from home, and was just in a really weird position. And um, I'll come out and say it. I've struggled with just managing projects on and like getting things done on time and taking on too much at once. And that was kind of the pinnacle of all that because I had three cars in here and a whole backlog of of stuff to do, and it was late on Sunday night of Memorial Day weekend, and had a car in here. We were switching over to EFI. I dropped the tank out of it and drained it, and there was about 4 gallons of nasty, murky gas with high water content, and just sitting in my shop. And it's just like, okay, I got a big brush pile to burn outside, and I need to get rid of this gas. Like, I don't want this just sitting around because something bad could happen. Um, so I was running on very little sleep and had a number of things on my mind, but I figured, okay, like if I light this burn pile out here, my shop is kind of in a weird area where I'm kind of cornered by a field, and I've got about 3 acres of we cleared out a whole bunch of trees here when I got the property, but so I had a big burn pile, like 10 foot high, 10 foot diameter, and all this gas. And so I'm like, okay, if I light this, then it'll keep me attentive. I can work through the night and just let it burn and check on it periodically, and it'll keep me focused and be one more thing in my mind to keep me from just passing out. And so just dumped all that gas and didn't have any trail to lead to the pile or anything like that, and I was boxed in. I've got storage containers on my property too, and they kind of boxed in, and the fumes just hung. And I lit it, and it just whoosh. Just a big. I remember seeing the mushroom cloud go up in the air, and just a big fireball.
Jeez.
And it fully engulfed me, and I mean, this all happened in like a matter of seconds. But like, I remember it coming at me, and so I like closed my eyes um, and like I grew up on a farm, and so like hay dust and barn dust and shit like that has always bothered me. And so like out of just reflex, like I just closed my eyes and I shut my mouth and I exhaled through just blew air out of my nose just to keep what's coming at me from getting in my nose. And then next thought was like, oh shit, I just burned my eyebrows off. Well, I opened up my eyes and my face was on fire. Like I was just all I could see was fire. And so I stopped, dropped, and rolled just like you learned in kindergarten, and stood up, tried to figure out what the hell just happened. And I wasn't really in any pain because I was in shock, but I was wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and a hat, and my hat was totally burned. That's what saved me from probably losing all my hair, but I lost my beard. Totally burned that off, and I went inside and kind of washed my hands and just trying to figure out like just collect. And so it got to a point I'm just like, this is kind of bad. So I called my dad. He's not far from here, and so I'm like, I just need your help. I don't know why or like what to do. I just need your help. And so he comes over here and he sees me and he's like, dude, we got to go. And so I hop in the truck with him. That's when feeling kind of started to come back. But he took me into the ER in St. Luke's. They took one look at me and they're like, you got to go. And so they were really concerned with internal damage to my lungs. And I'm like, no, I can breathe. I'm fine. But they stuck a tube down my throat and put me under just to be safe. And that was the last thing I remember. They airlifted me then to Iowa City to the burn unit. I don't remember any of that helicopter ride, but I woke up in the hospital and spent 28 days there.
It's rough.
So, yeah. So, um,
Understatement. Sorry.
no, you're fine. But so, yeah, 28 days there. It was 3rd degree on my arms, 2nd degree on my face and legs. 5, 6, 7 surgeries maybe through the whole experience. And it was definitely a learning experience and a trip. So my arms, it's healed really well actually, but
No,
everything
yeah, I
from
saw the pictures and stuff that you were posting, and I was like, man, that could be much worse. But it's not great, but it could, it's healing very well. They took care
oh
of
yeah,
you for sure.
they did. It's a really great facility, and so all the skin on both my arms right up to where my sleeve line is grafted. And interestingly enough, you can't permanently accept skin from anybody but yourself.
Hmm.
So like I had, it was pretty nasty, and uh, but I had cadaver skin on my arms wrapped up just through the first few weeks to get healed, and then once it was ready, they actually uh, took the skin from my thighs to do this grafting. Um, but uh,
So to
but yeah,
keep like the the muscle and skin, like third is like really far into the skin. Is it completely damaged? I forget. But anyway, so they wrapped it in cadaver skin to keep like the lowest layer fresh to accept your grafts.
Right.
That's
That's what it,
that's crazy.
yeah. I mean, because it was not quite down to the muscle, but it was pretty. It was the last layer of skin that was left on my arms. Um, and but I consider myself extremely lucky because, like I said, when it hit me and I exhaled, I mean, you would think like when you see that coming, you would like gasp
Of
out of fear.
course, yeah, that's a great reflex to have because
I
that would
know,
have
like
fried your lungs. Yep.
yeah, it like if I would have inhaled, I would have fallen down dead right there, and that would be it.
Yeah, it would have burnt. At least, even if it didn't kill you immediately, it would have swollen your lungs and throat till you couldn't breathe.
Yeah, so I got extremely lucky, but yeah, all in all, I was in the hospital for 3 months and out of habilitation for another. Well, no, I was in the hospital for 1 month, and then all in all, it's about three and a half months of my life just gone. But I mean, it's been a trip, but I learned from it, and yeah, so don't mess with gasoline. Um, and
Especially, I
gasoline
think the
water.
older it is, the easier it ignites because it's just because an octane rating like 93 is harder to burn. That's why it's a better fuel. So you would think the older it is, like the easier it is to burn and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good point. But and that's what I thought. Like I thought it was going to burn like diesel, with as watery as it was and nasty. But yeah, not the case.
Yeah, of course.
And then also interesting, like it was a freak thing that it was my fault. It happens, and then like right at the same time, I don't know if you saw Dave Vassar from uh, uh,
The name sounds familiar.
Nitro Dave from Nitrous Outlet. Yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah, he did like the exact same thing within like a week of the time I did it. He didn't get nearly as severely as I did, but I mean, here's a guy that's been messing with nitromethane for like as long as I've been alive, and it happened to him. So I mean, it's scary to see it can happen to anybody, but
Yeah, obviously he's pretty good with fuel, so yeah, you would think at this point he's pretty safe, right?
yeah, but yeah, it's just one of those freak things.
Oh, this he says, "Do you live in the Midwest? I'm not familiar with you."
I do live in the Midwest, and that might be another interesting thing to talk about. So I'm in Eastern Iowa, um, tiny little town here where we're at, but the power of social media is a great thing, and that's kind of what's allowed me to do what I do. Not much of my stuff stays local at all. Most of it's all word of mouth and finding me through Facebook. So, like, we've got a lot of really cool no time, no prep stuff going on in this area, and we've got a couple of fast tracks around here, like Cordova, um, I-29. That's on the other side of the state. So we've got some decent tracks around here, and but a lot of the stuff going on in the Midwest, I don't have to drive too far to get some good racing action. But a lot of my stuff gets shipped to way other regions of the state. So Texas, Minnesota, not that far, but that's a big one, surprisingly for me. East Coast, of course, hotbed for the motorsport stuff, but but yeah, not a ton of it that's like right here. Um, I've done some crazy stuff that I've shipped all over. I've shipped to New Zealand, Australia, France, Canada. Canada's an easy one. There's a few other countries over in Europe I've sent stuff to, and it just blows my mind to see this stuff come in. I'm actually doing a harness right now, a piggyback integration. It's gonna be interesting to see how that turns out. That's going to Egypt
Hmm.
for JK Jeep. It's gonna do some desert racing.
That's interesting. Straight to
Yeah,
Egypt.
right. But yeah, it's wild to see what comes in the door because I never know.
No, that is a guy here says that exhale technique is a thing they teach train or they train electricians to do instinctively also.
Really.
I'd assume because it's like you vapor if you're working with high voltage and amperage systems, you vaporize whatever you do and you just inhale like a bunch of like galvanized steel. You can just inhale a huge thing of it, I assume. Always
Yeah,
take a deep inhale before you do anything that could create an explosion. That way your lungs are already full. Oh, it would collapse your lung is what I think he means.
yeah. Well, I mean, not only that, but yeah, I mean, from anything to force its way in, that I mean, it's smart. And yeah, again, I was not aware of any of this training. I got lucky. So that's interesting.
What is this? Oh, if someone Martin made a donation, so I always like to read off what they say. What does this one say? Oh, it says, Matt, thanks for all you do. I was going to talk to you at LS Fest 2020, but I decided it's more polite to awkwardly stare at you while you ate your fries. Keep up the good work. Oh, I think I was with Shane Hines and his girlfriend at that time, and we got chicken fingers and fries.
Nice.
That's funny.
A little starstruck.
Yeah, LS Fest was like, oh, a little bit overwhelming for me. I want
Yeah,
to talk to everybody, but then at some point my batteries are just low, and then I'm like run away or rude to people.
I understand.
Oh yeah,
Stop
yeah,
being famous.
yeah. He says copper vaporizes easily, and inhaling that is bad. That's what I assumed. Is you would one the explosion or like might pop your lungs, and then two you're inhaling all sorts of vaporized awful things.
Yeah, I mean, like in my case, it would have just cooked them,
Oh yeah,
like
would have
literally.
fried
But
them.
but I can understand that. Yeah,
That's what I'm tear. I can get poison ivy in a breeze, so I'm always careful about burn piles because people say the same thing. You can breathe poison ivy particles, and then you get poison ivy in your lungs.
no shit. Oh,
Yep, yep,
that sounds horrible.
yep. Since I'm so allergic to it, my doctors early on were like, if someone's burning brush or leaves, don't go near it. Just because I'm like, oh, okay.
Noted.
Uh, okay. And then the last one before I want to hear all about integration and piggyback is, what is your biggest challenge when wiring any car?
That one's easy. Planning,
Ah, that's a good
planning,
answer.
planning. Yeah. So a lot of my biggest challenges when I was just trying to figure everything out and get my car in here. Just there's a lot of, especially on like a nitrous car that's running a carburetor, there's a lot of things that interconnect. I mean, you've got an ignition controller, you've got a nitrous controller, and you've got multiple things in separate
You
boxes.
wish they would
And
just dominate her the whole thing. I always like to make
yeah,
fun of those nitrous guys too. I'm like, you got a box that talks to a box that grounds to a box that powers a box that I'm like, guys, if
yeah.
you even if you kept the carb and just had the dominator do like 8 stages, you would love life.
Well, yeah, and so Dominator has been my bread and butter just because that's kind of what I mean. It's become it took a stakehold as the norm EFI system here in the States, and for a good reason. I mean, it's a good solid setup, but and I still do a lot with them. But my heart is on actually with Haltech,
Hmm.
um, and I would really like to do more with them moving forward. I'm a dealer for Haltech, but I'm a big advocate objectively for what is best for the application, even if it's not coming from me. And for a lot of guys, that's Dominator. So that is what it is. But a lot of the nitrous guys that I still work with and collab with, I'm trying. I've got about five of them that are just a hair trigger away from switching over to a Haltech VMS.
Hmm.
Have you seen that?
I've heard of it, but go into it.
So that is it's an ignition only ECU. So it's a teeny tiny little box. But Haltech made these specifically for that issue. You'd see like blower cars run a mechanical injection or a carbureted nitrous car, and it's like, yeah, you've got a box talking to a box talking to a box, and it's just a cluttered shit show. Well, how could we simplify that?
They
And
have a
so,
distributor and a coil and a 7150 programmable and a mechanical
yeah,
advance built into a vacuum and yeah.
exactly.
And they don't
So
even know what any of it does or where it ends up.
No, and with that cobbled wire nut junk going on, you can't troubleshoot it
They
either.
they love the wire nuts, that's for sure. That's
Oh,
why he
okay.
said it.
Those and the plastic T-taps, but no. So this Haltech VMS, it's got ignition outputs and then open I/O that you can use for like nitrous pressure, your trans brake, staging control, um,
So
fan
it
control.
runs coil packs.
Yeah, yep.
And then how do you feed it? Do you need like a trigger wheel?
Yeah, so you would use and that's Haltech's really flexible with their crank and cam inputs, which is another reason I really like
I
them.
do know that about them actually, because they'll even
Yeah.
write you. I remember watching Mighty Car Mods when they did the V6 turbo car.
Hmm.
They were on the phone with them and something wasn't working, so they specifically wrote custom firmware and then updated it while they were connected to support the crank trigger because no one else was doing it.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're very good people that stay on top of stuff and then push out updates out quickly like that. And yeah, so yeah, you would use. I mean, if you're going to run coils sequentially, you would need a cam sync too. Um, but uh, but otherwise, yeah, you just have like your flying magnet MFD wheel or a toothed wheel with a Hall effect sensor and yeah, run them sequentially.
what's funny to me is those guys will do all that but not put a dominator on.
I know, and like yeah, you think you're saving money, and then in the end of it, no, you're
Because you
not.
can't. And then those guys have like the nitrous big block guys are my favorite because they have 5 boxes and then they have a race pack to data log,
Yeah, the race. Oh,
and that costs
it
like
just
another
burns
3 grand.
right, and that's one thing that's also cool. Like with these guys that I'm trying to switch over from like a grid and a progressive. They're like, oh well, I've got all this equity in all my race pack stuff. Well, Haltech can talk to it, so so you can even leave all that stuff in place because that's one thing about that box. It doesn't have a ton of channels to use for like your
The
shock travel.
VMS.
The VMS, yeah, it's got CAN based ways to expand it, but just that the VMS alone, you've only got so many channels for like your pinion speed, your shock travel, um, just any all the I/O that you're probably going to have on a heavy hitting car. So you can leave all your race pack stuff in place and just connect it from VNet to CAN and keep all that stuff you've already got equity in. So I'm on a sales pitch here, I feel like, but
I have never used or tuned a Haltech car. I've downloaded the software, but that's totally different from actually using a system and seeing how well it works. I know. Oh man, I know my what's his name. He's gonna kill me. My other friend that does the wiring besides Devin. Dude, I can't think of his name. Anyway, he's a Haltech dealer, loves Haltech, has it on his Mustang. Troy Baum, Race Wires.
hmm,
He loves Haltech too, and supposedly there's someone I've tuned a few things for. They're building a him and his girlfriend are building a car, and it is also going to be Haltech, but a turbo LS. So that I'll learn something from that.
is that with the Nexus, the new one?
No,
Or
it
do
has
you,
the regular one. I know Troy has. I think he's done an install on the Nexus, and I think that's incredible. Doing the PDM and the ECU in the same spot. I question like how they do that without bleeding noise into each other, having a PDM and an ECU so next to each other. But maybe it's just totally separated, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
yeah, so and I think that's really cool because Haltech it's been a solid system. I mean, they've been in the game since the 80s. They know what they're doing. And yeah, the system their UI is very friendly. It's not it's very different from Holly, but it's still really easy and very flexible. Um, but that's one of the biggest problems they've had with their setup, and I think why they haven't really taken off um, in the streetcar market here in the U.S. They're based out of Australia, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they've got headquarters here in the states, obviously, but
Georgia.
Georgia and Kentucky, yeah, and I think they've got one over on the East Coast or the West Coast now. But their boxes are very limited on inputs outputs. Like the 2500 Elite, which is the top of the top for an Elite. I think you've only got like 8 or 9 output or inputs to use for auxiliary sensors in the end, compared to like 30 for a dominator.
Yeah, 96 IO is what it is. It's like 50 in and 40 out. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
No,
why that's why it's such a hard argument. People are like, "Man, a Dominator's expensive." I'm like, "It is incredibly cheap if you consider the IO." And then
yeah,
and then you're not giving up dual drive-by-wire and transmission control with the 96 IO. And that's one of the things I make fun of Troy so much is he wires a Haltech car and there's 6 boxes.
mhm.
I'm like a
Yeah,
box for a box with another box and a 0202 boxes. And then he's like, I know.
yeah. No, and that's just it. Because they've got a very nice ecosystem for expanding it. I mean, because yeah, like none of their ECUs before the Nexus had an onboard wideband control.
hmm
So yeah, they've got the wideband controller.
It's nice that they have it so expandable. What's annoying is you can't get something that just has like the Dominator, like just plug. Like just put one that has 6 of those 35 pin amp seals and call it a day.
Yeah, and that's where the Nexus came from. So
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, we want a one box solution, and they got it. And so yeah, um, I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how many IO it has, but it's pretty well on par with the Dominator.
I have to
Not
look it up
included.
again because it was a lot. And then what I
It
really
is a
liked,
lot.
I checked out the software. It shows like there's like an if then else you can build, and then you can choose the wire, the pin. It tells you the color of it, and then you can
Yes.
choose it as a PDM output to turn on fans directly. Like it's all in a line. I thought that
Hmm.
was incredible. And then I watched the special episodes that like Scott does, and I forget the name of the wiring guy, and they show that you can connect it over USB and it powers it, similar to like a lot of USB items. You can do all
Yep.
the configuration with it turned off. And then if you turn it on, it has Wi-Fi and it has like a pretty decent range, obviously depending on radio frequency interference and everything else. But you don't even have to go near it because people are always busting USB plugs off of things. And
Yep.
that's why Holly went to the CAN bus thing because everyone has a $2,000 Dominator and
Hmm.
they're retards and they jump into the car and kick the USB port off of a potted ECU. And no strain relief, nothing. And then they plug the USB. This is one that makes me cry at night because I'm an IT guy. So people plug in a USB device and then put it like USB device down into their seat. They just
Yeah.
like prop everything up by the USB. Then they're like, this thing never connects. And I'm like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
Any
people
car.
that's they. It's like people that smoke are like, I have lung cancer. I'm like, man, how did that happen?
Yeah. So, and that's another thing. So, any car that comes in here that I have control over, with whatever the ECU may be, I always try to work a bulkhead for the USB
Yeah,
into it.
very nice.
So, and that Motion has that cable saver. That's a very nice product. It's very useful. But again, if you just tuck it up and out of that traffic area, and then use a bulkhead to hide your cable, then you don't have to worry about it.
That's a
So,
big one for 20 or 40 bucks that everybody should do if they're going to be constantly plugging into stuff.
oh yeah, I mean, save your ECU, save you from a very bad day at the track.
Yeah, kicking a USB port off of a Dominator is the last thing you want to do. Oh
Yeah.
man. Oh, okay. Well, anything else to add to that? I am super interested in that Nexus. If Troy is ever wiring one and I can go down, I want to check it out,
Yeah.
honestly.
Cause,
People
and 'cause- Go ahead.
Oh, people think that's expensive too. They're like, "Oh man, like $3,000 or $4,000." I'm like, guys, it's a $2,000 PDM and a $2,000 ECU, and then like you and I understand, it's all in house. You're not
Yeah.
telling boxes to do, like it's doing it. It has full control of everything, and then like we say, if then else statement. If something keeps resetting, turn like if something keeps tripping out, turn the nitrous kit off. Like I'm sure you can tell it to do everything. If the engine's overheating, turn the ignition off or the voltage supplied to it. Or yeah, you can literally. And then I know with other PDMs, I'm gonna mess with this smart wire. It's way out of my league, but it'll show you how many times it tripped the breaker or
Mhm.
show you amperage draw. So Devin has done videos where he slowly turns on item after item, and you can go to the base page that shows total amperage draw, total voltage drop, total current, total, like you can just see the whole thing, and that's what's really cool about having all that in one place. Obviously, is incredible, and I
Yeah.
think guys that have 7 boxes don't understand why that's so incredible.
No, I know. And I was just about to say the exact same thing as yeah, I mean you get sticker shocked by it, but you compare it to I mean I've dealt with a couple of guys in the past month that are on the fence between a Nexus or a Dominator and a Smart Wire. Well, you're gonna spend the exact same money either way.
Yeah.
And so I mean the first question that I always ask when somebody asks me like what system should I go with? I mean, Haltech and Holly are my go-tos. I will work with just about anything. Um, I'm open to a lot of that stuff, but the big question is who's tuning it, as always. Um,
Yeah, make sure your tuner's familiar with it. If a bunch of your friends all have the same system,
yes,
not the whole jump off a bridge thing, but honestly, they all have spare parts, or maybe they know how to do something you don't. Or if you think your ECU's blown up, you can put theirs in. I know stuff at like Drag Week. Most of Drag Week is Holly. Holly goes to the events, so it's hard to install something else and expect some sort of help and support. That's a
and
big
that's
one.
very true. That's very true. So again, just I always look at what's the best solution for you, and um, even if it's a conflict of my interests.
Yes, exactly. And that's what a big point of that also is. I think I remember when Holly called me on board ahead of time about that Terminator launch,
Oh yeah.
and people, when that launched, people were pissed because they were like, stock computers still cheaper. And no one makes a video like that anymore, is what I try to point out to people, because it took those people a while to, I think, realize what they were talking down to. Because every now and then you get somebody that doesn't fully understand it, and they're like, well, I'm going to get a bump box and a boost controller and a wideband. And it's only stock ECU is cheap for people that have like unlimited Gen 3 truck licensing and know how to wire it and everything else, and to just get a swap running.
And are
Because
doing just like a pro touring build where they're not pushing it and they're not data logging and they're
yeah,
not doing
I don't think you guys. And then people are like, well, I want to do boost control, should I buy a boost controller? And they want to buy like a ball and spring or something, and I'm like, it does it. And then they're like, well, I want to control a nitrous kit. I'm like, it has nitrous specific configurations, like with pedal strategies and dry and progressive. And I'm like, I don't think you're getting it. And then when people mix fuels like E85 and gasoline, it applies the fuel multiplier to the nitrous kit. You don't have to rejet when you change fuels.
Mm-hmm.
Easy flex fuel capability. You can change the anything in and out. Like I'm like, you can change the boost amount by flex fuel amount. And they're like, really? I'm like, you can do a speed input and do boost by mile an hour. And they're like, really? I'm like, you can do bump
Yeah.
and brake through the ECU to control an SSR. And they're like, oh, like it takes. And then I'm like, I don't understand. Because when they told me, I was like, well, budget ECU, you guys are funny. What's that going to cost? And they're like $9.99. I'm like, oh, that for the ECU isn't terrible, but that's what an HP costs. And he's like, that's ECU, wiring harness, wideband, and a 3.5 inch touchscreen, which people aren't getting. The touchscreen is a tuner, is a data logger, can load files, firmware. I'm like, yeah, get HP tuners if you know nothing and try to get your car running, and then fire up a Terminator and what we call Game Boying a tune. You beep up, and the car runs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who? Nobody else does that, as far as I know. Like Calltech or anybody doesn't have like you can just
They
punch it in
don't.
and start. It's
They
incredible.
don't. It is though. So and on yeah, like I don't understand how Holly's making any money on that. I mean the
That's what
margins
I
there.
thought to myself. I'm like, after he told me all that, I'm like, everyone's gonna go out of business, and you're never gonna be able to put this on a shelf. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean I'm not an actual Holly dealer myself, but I know margins are pretty thin. on those for legit Holly
It's
deals.
almost nothing. People are always like, "I'm gonna get a deal," and I'm like, "That guy."
No, you're not.
I'm
Like
like, it is so shallow that that guy's making no money to talk to you and take you on for tech support. So that's like what
it
Devin
is.
always says. If you're buying someone scalping, they are not able to help you. But if you pay me to do everything, I'll answer the phone. You know, that's what you're paying for, not the 10% discount, but
Oh
having
yeah.
someone to ask.
Yeah, because I mean, you always see that in like the Holly FI discussion page. Everyone's like, "Who's got best price on X today?"
They'll make a
And
dollar. They'll make a
yeah,
dollar. It's disgusting.
here's everybody out there cutting each other's throats to make $30 on a $2,000 sale, and sell. They're drop shipping from their mom's basement and aren't, again, no support, and it's a weird world.
It is, and that's why they offer no discounts, in my opinion, is because people are doing way too much of that, and they understand that they can
Yeah,
give people MSRP. Say they can get the product 40% less. They're going to sell it to everybody for 40% less, and then no one's making any money again. No one's making any money anyway, but Holly's making way less. Which why would they choose that? So.
yeah. So
Oh yeah, well that's another. People are asking about integration already, and something I learned really cool is that Max ECU. You ever hear of that?
yeah, a little bit.
Because it has the DCT control for the BMW, and then also it has built-in CAN bus translation and supports the E38 ECU.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't either until I did more research. So I wish more people would use that too.
Pro AFI is another one that does a lot of that
You're
stuff.
right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Pro EFI has a CAN spitter.
Yeah. Haltech's CAN integration is very flexible. That's one thing that I don't like about Holly still is they don't play nice, and they don't their CAN bus is locked down pretty hard. Haltech is pretty flexible where it'll work with the CAN based GM stuff, and you can sniff it out and configure it and do all sorts of custom stuff with it. So
I didn't know that either. I knew it was friendlier to accept and display and spit things. Like it was multifunctional with a lot of things that are CAN, but I didn't
mhm.
know, it was configurable and everything else.
Yeah, it can be configured to work with about any other CAN-based device, whether it be RacePack. Um, I'm drawing a blank on any other examples, but yeah, you can
That's the
configure
big
it
one.
to.
Everyone has race pack, so they don't want to change everything, so they can install that and it, you know.
Yeah, because for a while, Haltech and RacePack were actually holding hands and doing some stuff together.
I believe it.
Um,
I feel like RacePack got out of their league fast, and if you use any of their software, it's like working with an Atari. It's very frustrating. I wish
yeah,
you feel that same pain. It is so difficult. That's why I know Holly bought RacePack. I can't wait
yes,
till their software engineers just take all of the RacePack software and throw it in a trash bin. But that's difficult because everybody already uses it. But I can
yeah,
only assume that Holly is building a product to compete with the Nexus since they can't just allow that. So I'm looking
probably.
forward to Holly software with PDM possibility.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see it eventually, but yeah, and that's one thing that just burns me still. It's like someone's like, they're doing a brand new build and they're like, we're doing this nice, we're doing this with all the baddest of the bad. And then they got that
SmartWire.
not even the smart wire, but I mean, honestly, I'm
The
not a huge
little
fan of the smart
module,
wire.
right?
No, the freaking the IQ3 race pack
Oh
display.
yeah,
It's like it looks like a TI-87 calculator.
so
It's driving
antiquated.
me nuts. Yeah.
I got one of those because the MS3 could spit CAN for a race pack. But then what I
Yeah.
learned was it could only throw like 10 channels to a race pack, and the race pack is nearly not configurable at all. Like you said, it's a Casio. So if there's a giant like a gear selector in the middle, you can't really make it do anything. You can't like
Yeah.
repurpose it. It's very difficult. What I tried to use it for was a gas gauge. Like 10 was full and 5 was 50%, and I could barely make it do that. It wouldn't work. So
The resolution is just that low.
I was
So
very frustrated with it. So that's why another reason I think why people love Holly stuff is. Like once you get it, you can get the dash, you can get any dash, you can whatever.
Yeah. Tech Mark B, I feel you. That's what we're talking about. Blue Dash. Uh,
Blue dash. Yep. All that was fun in that car was me getting blinded by the shift lights doing third gear rev limiter burnouts. Nothing better than the progressives just nailing you in the
oh
eyes.
yeah,
I had a speedometer output that I got to work, and it would just be like 140, 90, 140, like I was pedaling in high,
yeah,
scrambling the numbers.
yeah.
All right, well let's go. Let's get to the meat of it, which is the piggybacking stuff and integration. Which explain what it is for people listening that don't know what we mean by piggyback and integration.
Okay, so piggybacking, it's nothing new. There have been people doing it ever since aftermarket EFI systems started just being available. But the trouble is with modern cars, your ECU, I mean, now the stuff's CAN based too. You've got a lot of things that the ECU is tied to outside of just the engine. So, like your gauges, you've got things tied into the body control module, air conditioning, just making those things work without a stock ECU present in a late model car, it just isn't possible. But then, like we said, with a stock ECU, you hit your limits on what you can do with your fuel and spark strategies, and you don't have those safeties. Throwing six other boxes in your car just to do nitrous and trans brake and whatever. And a few different tuners I know have put it in a really good way. When you're trying to tune a stock ECU for making big power, you're almost tricking it into thinking something that is not true rather than optimizing it for the fuel and the spark that you want.
What I always like to say, and I think it's clever, and it clarifies it a lot for people that don't know it, is I say a stock computer is a federally mandated emissions control device that horsepower is a byproduct of.
It is.
That explains it to people that don't know what it's like to fight with a stock ECU all day to make it do something, and then the next day it doesn't do what you wanted it to do, and you have to go through a whole thing. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so with that said, putting an aftermarket ECU into a late model car to run your fuel and your spark, and all pertinent things with the engine, and then the stock ECU stays in place with as minimal functions as possible, just to make all the other factory things on the car, like your gauges and your body control module and your anti-theft, whatever's applicable, just to keep those things happy. So that in some things involves splitting signals, and there's a lot of diagnostic codes you got to go in with HP tuners and shut off, because there's a lot of stuff that's just not there anymore to keep your stock ECU from freaking out. But the hot one, well, actually, we'll start with this. What got you and me in actual contact with each other? Like I kind of been following you, and we've been friends on Facebook for a while, and then I was working with Rick Trunkett at Big Three on doing a piggyback setup for a C6 Corvette. And so I made this weird potted pass-through deal, and ultimately that was a fail. There was a lot of learning from it, um, but somehow you got word of that, or maybe you just asked me, and I was like, "Hey, that's really funny because look what I have in my hands right now." That might have been what it was, but
Yeah, what I did is I have been beating the drum about this for like over a year because your accident was a year ago. And
mm-hmm.
I was like, guys, make you want to be a millionaire overnight, make a CAN bus translator for Holly and an E38 first, and then maybe venture into a P01 P59 because that's serial data. The CAN
Yep,
bus stuff is the future. The people that are on a E38 and up Gen 4 ECU are the people that want this the most, and not to put down anybody, but they have the money right now. People buying
yeah,
the 10-year-old, 5-year-old Corvette that want to get wild with it have the money to do it right now. So my buddy Chris Ortiz says it all the time, like, make a drop-in that can coexist with a Holly, that can satiate everything. And I have friends that have done it. Like Mike Page wrote his own CAN bus software. He does that. He owns like e90swap.com.
Okay.
So he builds plug and play Terminator stuff, and he has a box that completely satiates the BMW stuff. And if you can plug a Terminator in and this box, and none of the lights are on in the dash, the speedometer, the tach, the water temp, everything functions as normal. It completely translates. And then, like even like my G, the HVAC controls are CAN bus.
Hmm.
There's three wires. There's like power, ground, and CAN bus. And you're like AC on, and then it tells the body control module to turn the AC and the vents on. People are missing that whole aspect of it too. That's how you cut down. That's how you have 75 things in your car that don't have 50 miles of wiring. You don't have conduit in the middle of your car with 700 pounds of copper wiring.
Where you're passing different analog signals to multiple. Yeah, it's just
You're like your switch in your door for your windows would have 17 connections, so it could do all the stuff that it does now.
right.
And then it would need like logic to turn stuff on and off. But anyway, I was like, someone needs to do this, and I was just like on everybody's back, like do this, and they didn't, and it took long. And Holly has it. Holly released it, and they released it for the price I told everybody to do it for. But they have that can't like he was saying he doesn't want to do like an end all translator, but he would build an IO box, and Holly
Mhm.
already has it, so too late.
Yeah, well, there is a guy out there that has it. It was right about the time that I got. It wasn't long after I got mine done, and we tried it, and there were a few bugs with it that were just kind of natural. I can't remember what his name is, but the Gateway, that's what it's called.
Huh.
Um, the first one released was for like the SN 197 Mustangs.
Is that a
Um,
3 valve?
yes, I think. Maybe it's the body style
Anyway,
above
sorry.
that. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not good with modern Mustangs, but yeah. Here, first one released was for Ford, and then I think the E38 one was on the way if it's not out already. Um, but yeah, Rick's selling those now. Um, and I haven't seen a lot from them since they got released, I'm kind of surprised at that if it took off. If it's, I mean, I would think it'd be all over my Facebook right now if it has taken off from what it was supposed to be, and maybe it has, but I know it's out there. So
But that's what happened. I was beating the drum about this, and I was like, is anyone capable of this that I can force them into this project and whatever else? And people were 2 or 3 people were like get in contact with Jolt, and they were tagging you and the page. And that's when we went back and forth, and you were like, I have an E38 thing that's supposed to be passed through. I think you showed me something that had like the E38, and then it kind of split to like normal functions for the E and then to the Terminator. And then the Terminator was into the looms for injectors, coils, everything else. Like it was if you would build your own integrated thing, slapstick on your own, it was that in a nicer, cleaner package.
yeah, it was like what it was is it was a 3D printed base, um, and I was able to source the solder to board connectors that you actually see on an E38 ECU. So those were mounted in that, and then there was a lot of soldering, and it was a giant pain in the ass to build. And then once I had it all soldered, I potted it from the bottom. But so yeah, it would basically bolt right where the stock E38 went. So your stock harness is right there. It plugged in, and then had a lead that was long enough to relocate the E38 into a clean space, and then a separate lead that branched out and went to your Terminator. And so it was slick in on paper, and with better manufacturing or a better build process, it would work. But it just I learned a lot from it. I'll say that. So, and it's something I might come back to eventually. But the hot one right now, just to stay on track, is for fourth gen F bodies. So yeah, I did a harness for somebody asked me like if I could do an F body harness that would just be plug and play, but for Holly, and it's like, oh yeah, that's easy. Like I've got all the the way an F body harness drops into a car and connects to the engine and then interfaces to the rest of the body stuff is really straightforward and simple. And so I've had all that data for a while. Um, and so, yeah, I could easily build a harness that did that and just fit in like factory. And so I did a couple of those, and it's something that's been listed on the site for a while.
Hmm.
And then, but I mean, it was pretty simple in what it was. I mean, it was no more than a Holly harness that would just use the factory relay block under the hood
Because those
of an.
cars are simple.
They're simple, yeah. But then I kind of started chipping away at just some of the little holes in the product and like knowing what it could be. I mean, there wasn't even really demand for it, so it's like I was just kind of dumping a lot of time into a project and kind of coming on and off of it. And then Terminator came out.
And then it wasn't fruitful.
No, and I mean that was partially on me because I was pushing it, but then Terminator X came out, and that picked up some momentum, and then like overnight, flip of a switch. I don't know who was sharing it or if anybody was like posting it, but I got like 7 orders in the matter of 2 weeks for this harness. I'm just like, whoa, where are these coming from? And they're all built to order, so I had no stock and a lot to still kind of figure out on these things. So that was kind of my fault for not having a product for sale that wasn't exactly ready. But a lot of this stuff, like I didn't even know what I wanted it to be, and so I've still got a few in my backlog to finish up and get out of here.
You put out like a feeler to see if it would be, if people would even be interesting, and then 12 people ordered it, and you were like, oh shit.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I've been. So and a lot of this is and I'm pretty grateful and lucky where everybody's pretty cool and pretty patient. I mean, it's been a few months on this project. The guys are still waiting for harnesses, just full disclosure. But I think we're at the end of the tunnel of where I finally got them perfected and figured out, and they're how I want them to be to get them shipped out of here. So yeah, as you mentioned, the 0411s use serial data. They're not CAN bus. But then so on the fourth gen F bodies, 93 to 98, it's pretty simple to do a piggyback. You don't even need a stock ECU in those cars at all to do any to keep any factory functions. 99 to '02 cars are a little different because pretty much everything on the stock gauge cluster runs through that serial data. So without a stock ECU in place, you don't even have tach signal. You don't have tach, you don't have coolant temp, you don't have fuel level. So then I'm just like, oh God, I mean, do we really want to piggyback a freaking old piece of junk 411 in here just like for 3 wires to keep that running? But so I kind of wrestled with that internally, and it's necessary unless you have something that can sniff serial data, like you said. But I don't have the resources for that. So, and most of these guys, they already got their stock ECU. They're ordering this because they push the limits of what they can do with HP tuners. So they've got equity in their license, and it just works.
Yeah, and then what they're doing is they're integrating and then just leaving the stock computer and just changing things on their own. But that's difficult for people that don't, like I said, don't have licensing already and don't want to deal with it. And I wish that there was something like I learned about this stuff recently too, like not last 5 years or so. Cyvex. You ever hear of that?
No.
Oh man, this will blow your mind. Like I've been going to a lot of those events. My friends host the GTR World Cup,
Yep.
and a lot of those like GTRs, Audi R8s, a lot of the Audi stuff, Lamborghini, everything, Porsche. So the Cyvex is a plug and play. Like it's like imagine like a Haltech that plugs into the same connector as the stock ECU and makes all the stock computer stuff work and happy, adds functionality to the stock ECU, and then is a complete standalone, but makes the gauges. So you can have like an Audi RS3 and plug and play a Cyvex. Everything works, all the complicated shit works, but then you have those buttons like if you hold something and change, if you hit cruise control, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the tack, and that's like your power modes. And then in the dash where you can see, you can flip between gauges. Like those cars are really fancy with like, they do the map in the background and gauges in the foreground, and you can swap everything, and it's like a
Yeah.
beautiful computer display. They add stuff like you can see ethanol content on one of the factory style gauges and like all sorts of crazy things, but it's literally like you plug it in place and it's a complete standalone and it makes the entire car happy like Lamborghinis have it, a bunch of things. It's like Motec can do similar, like fifth
Yeah.
gen, like Calvo Motorsports Dodge Vipers have the fully integrated Motec where you can use the cruise control buttons to do rolling anti-lag and all of that crazy stuff. But I recently learned about Cyvex for like Lamborghini because of all those dual clutch classes and all those high end cars. I'm like, how do they make all that stuff work? And someone's like, oh, a Cyvex, and I'm like, what is that? And everyone's like,
Yeah.
haha, you don't know what a Cyvex is. I'm like, no, I never touch Lamborghinis or R8s. Excuse me.
Right. Yeah.
It's not in my wheelhouse right now, anyway.
Yeah. I'm just a dumb farm kid from Iowa, so
Yeah,
I
so
don't see
that's
any.
that's pretty crazy, right? Because I was at GTR World Cup and I talked to Hank Iraz, which is like the fastest, best Audi guy ever, and he was telling he was like, he struggles with customers that don't want to do a standalone, and I'm like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, are you giving up a lot? And he's like, no, like you unplug. He says actually when he tunes some cars, he unplugs the stock computer and makes sure they're happy on a Cyvex, and then goes to like cob flashing because the Cyvex is so much faster to iron stuff out and know if there's a problem. And he's
Huh.
like, I'm like, what does it cost? Because I know Motec starts at like 10 grand to do stuff. And I'm like, what's a complete plug and play Cyvex? And do you do any, like, you don't have to do anything, right? And he's like, no, you load a base and you start the car and you drive it to the gas station. And I was like, that blows my mind. What does that cost? He's like, 4,200 bucks. And I was like, that is
Wow.
incredibly cheap and affordable. And he's like, I wish everybody could understand that. Everyone complains about how expensive it is. I'm like, people buy a brand new RS3 and drop it off with you for a built motor, built transmission, complete turbo kit, intercooler, map sensors, billet intake manifold, and they complain about a $4,200 Cyvex. And he's like, yes.
I feel that extremely. So first, you need to send me some links on that stuff. But that's one thing that still burns me is that a lot of guys. I mean, I feel like I try to educate and like be transparent about like where the costs are coming from, and I've had problems where I just frankly haven't been charging enough for stuff for a while,
Same
and
thing.
kind of figuring it out. So, but no, when you have a $2,000 Dominator ECU and I mean a built billet block, and you've got a $8,000 billet intake manifold on top of that with an intercooler, and then you bark at a system that costs 3 grand for bumper to bumper with all the functionality you need. And I mean, it's wiring is an afterthought to a lot of people still, even today, and it still shows. And so, I mean, I think a lot of people are getting smarter with it, and just because it's more present and the carburetors are going away, but yeah, it's a big thing that we're still working through.
No, yeah, and my buddy Cameron says the same thing about transmissions. People spend $54,000 on an engine, but then
Hmm.
you tell them a transmission and whatever setup that's safe and well built for that is like 3,500 bucks, and they're like, "Oh, wow, $3,500." And you're like, "Yeah." And same thing, like that's the afterthought. People have no problem dropping 5 to 15 on an engine, but then, like you said, a Dominator, 3 grand, they're like, I can't do that. And you're like,
Well,
man, you...
the guys I see are they'll spend all that money and they'll buy the 12.8 Pro Dash and all the modules and all this the hard parts they need, and then when a good rule of thumb that I've heard a few people say that I can vouch to is whatever you spend on your devices, your ECU, your dash, all your sensors, whatever you spend on that, the wiring to make all that work done right, the cost is probably going to match what you spent on that hardware.
Yeah.
And it's pretty accurate, actually. So, but nobody's ever prepared for it, it seems. So, but so just getting people. I've done a lot of weeding out, and that's kind of where the stock ECU stuff went away for me. Is guys
I don't
that
want to touch
actually
it
value.
anymore either, dude. The
Yeah,
expectation and everything else, and
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, the expectations for what they're getting and what they're even willing to pay, and then you got a guy that is like, I paid good money for this setup, and my I can't read oil pressure through the ECU. It's like, yeah, it doesn't do that. I mean, like, sorry.
It was built in '98.
Yeah,
And then a P59 up into like almost 10 years later is still the same architecture.
it is. It's just UART serial drive by wire, and
Yeah.
but
Anyway,
yeah,
it
but
is
potato.
difficult to try to explain that to people. Oh, someone earlier on, I don't know if you know this, but I'm part of the groups that do it. I forget who it was, and scrolling through it's difficult. But we were bashing stock computer stuff and functionality, and they were like, "Hey, there's people doing stuff with stock computers," and I'm actually very interested in the one on a sloppy private. A guy is building like he's starting small and building in Arduino boards and cutting traces in the computer and using like external map sensor into the stock map sensor port and a bunch of other things, and using IO that doesn't exist and repurposing it through, because there is dead space, and part of me is like, why don't people make like a Honda S300
Yeah.
for PL1s? That would be cool, and you could implement a lot of functionality even though it's useless because the Terminator is so cheap. Anything you would spend on a board and then cutting, and yeah, anyway, it's cool, and I like what he's doing, but part of me is like, what's the overall functionality of that? How many IO, and how do you interface it with the computer when you have something like a Terminator? And then it's hard to tell people, but the upgrade path from there is incredible too. You can have a full-on Terminator car, and then you can go straight to a Dominator. Everything's the same. You just plug it in.
Yeah.
You can swap it out
Yeah.
in like 30 seconds. And people are
Yeah.
like, "Really?" And I'm like, "It's that's why they're so smart. Everything's the same."
Mm-hmm.
And they don't.
Everyone there's yeah, except for one like little niche difference.
Yeah, I'm like,
So
I don't think you're getting it. Like that's the whole. Yeah, and then you can have a Terminator with the 7-inch dash, and then you can plug in a Dominator, and the 7-inch dash is still the same. Like whatever setup you had on it, it's just reading the info. Oh, they said Codeman Rose is the guy that does it. Yep, yep, yep. I think what he's doing is incredible, but I question the validity, and I think it's neat to do like a project like that for maybe a brain exercise, but it's like the people bring it up to me all the time. You hear a Speedwino.
yeah.
It's like $100 less than a micro squirt, but you have to build all of it yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, people are getting into it, want to tinker, and I'm like, here's my honest opinion is, who's using that and going faster daily driving it?
Nobody. I
Nobody.
mean, no, it's a science fair project, and
Yeah,
and that's cool, but yeah, like he's there's with everything there's just no place for it.
it's too
But
difficult to implement that, especially when you have to do all that work, and you can
mhm.
literally like, I even did a 4 valve car the other day on a Terminator, and man, I haven't touched Fords really at all because I won't learn. I don't want to learn the Ford tuning stuff. I hate it.
Yeah.
The modeling is totally different, and like you said, I don't even want to touch stock computers anymore. There's plenty of people that do it. Good for them. Don't want to touch them anymore. Phasing
Yeah.
it out. But
No, like
I'll go.
no, yeah, I've got a there's a tuner really close to me that does some really good stuff. Tyler Sipar, and I get Holly builds that I try to push to him, and they don't really bite because I mean he's so immersed in the stock ECU stuff that he does with like late model CTSVs and stuff, and I have a hard time seeing it. It just blows me. It's like, why are you still messing with this stuff? But he's good at
There's
it,
a good
and
market. Yeah.
yeah, so
I have friends that are really good stock computer tuning guys, and when they open up a Holly, they're like, I don't know what to do.
it's
Because
like,
the thing is, you can do whatever you want. So they're
yeah,
lost.
yeah,
They're lost. And it's people that are very successful, and they're like, because you have like the target air fuel table, and you're like, do this, and you can turn on 100% fuel correction and go floor an 850 rear wheel horsepower car and fix it later, and it's fine.
yeah, yeah,
99% of the time, it's going to be totally fine. And their brain is like, nope, no. And you're like, yeah, yep, Yeah, your first
Dude,
pass at the track can be like an 840 if you want to. And they're like, what?
yeah, yeah,
And then you start explaining like CO2 based dome boost control and double valves and everything else in a trans brake, and they're like, no, I don't understand it. I don't have
yeah.
the capacity. And I'm like, all right, I'm just a dumb guy over here, I guess.
I mean, that's okay. It's a different side to the
Yeah, of
same coin.
course. Yep.
So, um,
What
there's
is
something
a
else.
Oh, the guy Cameron's boss is like an old Tennessee guy, and he goes, takes all sorts. He always has like these real short, intelligent idioms he says all the time, but takes all sorts, and that's totally true. Like, you need somebody to do that. I just don't want to.
Takes all types to make the world go around.
Yeah, that's what he means.
That's the one that I get. But hey, Potato actually had a pretty good question up there. Did you see that one about prep versus no prep?
Yeah, didn't I say this earlier? This is the same guy, Potato R33. He comes
Yeah,
on every
yeah.
one and asks excellent questions, and he's always surprised that I say that. Oh, this person. Oh, anyway, go do the no prep thing, and then we have another ones here.
Well, interestingly, not much of a difference, really. I mean, whether we're building a harness for a stock LS1 or a billet LSR, I mean, that's making 12, 1400 horse. The harness is the same, really. I mean, it's not like it's not like you're upgrading heads or anything. I mean, the harness is the harness. The control signals are going to be the same. Um,
It's all power management for no prep, in my
it's all
opinion.
power management. That's
And
it.
that's
Yeah.
what
I
I think
mean,
people are missing. That's what they do at the track all day too. You can't
mhm.
use all the horsepower with a 3500 horsepower drag radial versus a whirl card. You can't use it all.
No, and that's the street is the equalizer, as they say. But I mean, yeah, I'll recommend like yeah, you should definitely do shock travel. We definitely need a pinion speed sensor in there for some torque management strategy. Um, but I mean, but I'm doing that stuff on prep cars too. So
Yeah, like you
just
said, it's all the same thing.
it's really the same thing. It's the tuner and the driver that is the big difference.
Knowing the
So
car and making the car work, same as any
yeah,
any situation.
it is. And um, yeah, just data, data, data.
I'd love to see more of that. I just started getting into that because I think realistically in the last couple of years my tuning is so reliable that I want to know more and more because I like calling people on their bullshit a lot. That's part of my
Mhm.
attitude. So part of me is like, "Oh, your people are like your crankcase pressure must be through the roof and how do you know it's safe? You don't even look at coolant pressure." So I started doing both. And
Mhm.
then I would give them data logs, and then they're like, I have an inertia dyno, and they're like, well, that's not accurate. There's no load. So then I was doing like 0 to 135 pulls in a 5,500 pound 3/4 ton truck that makes 850 wheel. And I'm like, my coolant pressure never went over 13 pounds.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh. And I'm like, how about you guys? What's your coolant pressure? They don't know.
Yeah.
They were just being jerks because I didn't have the information. Well, now I do, and now they don't know. Now all of a sudden they can't produce data. But yeah, so it's neat to see like that 850 horsepower stock bottom end whatever truck. The crankcase pressure was almost non-existent. It was like a half a pound or 1 pound at 20 pounds of boost.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I thought it would be more. And then also that was a larger turbo, but my EMAP was like 1 to 1 up to 26 pounds or less. I was surprised, but it was an 80-102.
Huh. On a 6 liter?
Yep. Like 24 pounds had like 22 pounds of exhaust pressure.
Yeah. I mean, that's right where you need. I mean,
Much
as
better
long
than
as
I've
you're not over
seen
101.
prior.
Yeah. Yeah. So
He has another good question, Potato R33. What's the most useless sensor that people demand you include? And then what's the most useful sensor that people frequently neglect? That's a great question, dude.
yeah, most useless. I'm gonna think on that one for a minute. Most useful. Cooling system pressure, that's pretty much a given on anything I do, whether it's a turbo or nitrous car. That data is invaluable. Um,
I'm learning more and more though that I mean you can save someone's life by looking at coolant pressure, and you can see a head gasket issue from a mile away.
yeah, you can, and that's what it's really good for. Because, yeah, not to mansplain it, but for anybody that's not up to speed on it, with if you put a pressure sensor in your cooling system, um, the pressure you should see ideally is just about what your radiator cap is set at, like 11, 12, 13 pounds, like you said, Matt. And if your head gasket's getting ready to go, you'll see little spikes in it, and so it's a really good warning indicator. Um,
And then you can
Handback,
have a safety built in. So if you guys on
yes.
lower horsepower, if you guys baseline 13 pounds, and then my buddy Frank, which has some pretty radical cars, he has like a door slammer radial versus world car that's gone like very close to record like 380s and whatnot. He's the guy you've seen on like 1320 hanging a wheelie like flying the car through the eighth mile at 211 on the back tires. But he says like on really high horsepower applications you will see some seeping, but obviously a spike is bad. Closing in on your boost level is bad. And you can set up in like Holly people because all the inputs are king, right? And then the ECU
Mhm.
controlling spark and everything. You can kill spark when the coolant pressure comes up, guys. And then if you do that, you don't knock the freeze out plugs out of your heads or blow your radiator up in front of your car and blow
And
coolant or water all over your tires and end yourself.
yep,
Even if you'll
and
be fine, you won't have the mess and you won't have to fix a car.
and you won't have 20 pissed off people that are in the staging lanes behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, the
So
coolant pressure thing I've learned is pretty big. I haven't had any issues with it, but most of what I do never pushes coolant. So,
yeah.
oh, but go ahead with, oh yeah, did you say the most useless one? So the most useful is you would say coolant pressure once you start making power.
Yeah, I mean that's just a basic one out there.
Say some more while you're at it. I'm gonna try to listen for once. I'm gonna mute myself and shut up.
No, you're good. Just kind of tying in and going off on a little tangent on that coolant temp, the low dollar and the Rife combo sensors with temperature and pressure, those are becoming a decent thing. They finally, but I think both companies now have one that's got the M12 threads, so you can use it as a direct replacement for your LS coolant temp sensor. And so I'm setting up more builds for those. Um, Transmission data, that's becoming a big one. I know you're muted. You got something to say, quick? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not unmuted so they can hear me. I have a combo sensor. My biggest gripe with that is so now people can. I would like to know what your experience is, and I've said it to. I mean, I am a dick to those guys, but I've given. I know Tyler Sandow at Motion Raceworks, and they've shown how well that works, where you can see coolant pressure. But they show their data logs, and it's like it's up and down like 30 pounds, and I think it just gets a lot of noise in the cylinder head. And where I do it is usually in the upper coolant hose, and
Yeah.
I get a beautiful signal. But then they show the $150 Rife, and it has a shit signal in my opinion, and it's all over. And if you were to run a safety on that, you'd be nicking it all the time or turning it off, and then what's the use of it? And then the data is so shaky that there's no use for it in my opinion either. If you had a wideband and your air fuel was 9 and 20 the whole time, what the hell is the use? But what did you ever use one? A Rife combination with like the M12 or 14 or whatever it is? Or do you normally run a single sensor like I was talking about?
So, I mean, in the past, I've done largely just the single sensors. But I've generally everything I've set up has been to put one in the head. Um, so whether it be a standalone 3-pin transducer that's going in the back port on the other head, um, or whatever, but yeah, to do the combo sensors in the head in place with the cooling system temp sensor and just do one sensor. That's usually what I'm doing, just out of sake of simplicity in the harness, instead of building a whole nother lead that's got to follow the fender well and go up to the overflow or to the radiator tank, like you were saying. And I haven't had anybody come back to me on complaints of a dirty signal, so I don't have a lot of data on that, to be honest. But that's interesting. And
Have you ever logged it? Like, do you ever see log? Like, maybe you could go back and look at them if you have logs from people that have the combo sensor. But and then that what would I didn't I thought I had it in my box, but I recently gave Calvin Nelson my Holly IO box because I didn't have a good use case for it and didn't want to waste it. And
mm,
I'm sure they would use all 8 ins and outs. And then I gave him all the rest of my low dollar sensors, including like an infrared tire and track temperature sensor and everything.
yeah.
So I was gonna show everybody, but you know, whatever. I
Mhm.
don't have it.
Yeah, I don't have any here either. I usually have about five at a time, and I send them all out.
And then my other gripe with that is it's pretty fat, and I think it gets pretty close to the header exhaust flange.
Yeah, yeah, you are right on that. I mean, they're not. Gosh, I mean the body on it's probably
What
seven
is it,
eighths
like
inch
a three
diameter.
quarter? Because the stock one's a 19, so it's got to be bigger than that.
Wrench size.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not that much bigger. It might just be a 19,
Huh. The same.
but yeah, maybe not. I might have one, and you got me tempted to go dig now.
I just like to give pros and cons.
Yeah, no, and those are definitely valid. Um, So and I always try to be upfront. I am by no means a tuner. I know enough to be that dangerous and to set up a pin map, and to kind of field questions as far as like direction. But I will not like set up a fuel map for somebody. I'm just not there, and I try to stay in my lane. But I don't have any data logs on hand from any customers, and a lot of the ones like, well, the latest one that I sent out a Rife sensor with to go in the head, he's on the dyno Monday, so
Ah.
um, and he's only on the other side of the state, so I'll probably be getting in touch with him just to see.
Shoot me some
Um,
logs if it's not secret squirrel.
yeah, I don't think it's I mean it's a twin turbo LS build that's going to make some steam for sure, but I don't think it's necessarily secret squirrel. But I'm Joey Keeman is the one tuning it, so
You could just
he's
ask him like, is the cool? It's a Rife one, right?
yeah,
You can be, and it's not like a, it's not, it's like stock water jacketed and everything.
yeah, yeah,
I would be very interested. You could just say, is the coolant pressure data smooth or is it awful? Because part of
yeah,
me's wondering, because I hate that they, Motion put out a video showing that really shitty signal, and I'm like, that's a really poor representation if they could have tried 2 or 3 times more to not have such an awful signal. Because I even asked that in one of their videos, and I'm like, surprisingly, not to be a prick here, but that data is all over. How is that misrepresentative, or do you have other people? I'm like, why would someone buy a $150 sensor that takes a custom coolant calibration and shows data so awfully? Not to
yeah.
be, again, not to be a prick, but my
No,
my low dollar $35 pressure sensor and my stock GM zero cost coolant temperature thing work really good.
yeah, no, that's interesting. So yeah, honestly, like you got me on that one. I don't have that data, but I'm interested to find it, and if that can help me improve what I do and for people, then
Now you
yeah,
can't remove it from your head. You're gonna be laying down to go to bed like I do. I'm like, man, I wonder why the signal's so bad and the Rife and did they just misrepresent such an expensive sensor or blah? Because then what's cool is they have that. I think they make incredible stuff.
hmm,
Like they make that block that does. It's like a multi thing for the transmission. You've seen that?
yes, yeah, they're stacked sensor blocks. So those are really cool, and I think a lot of people still don't quite understand them, but I've got a few builds in the works that I'm trying to get them set up for. And so yeah, when you got things like um and they're configurable, like because one thing that I was really concerned with and kind of playing the wait and see game on when those came out is just the reliability because it's a billet block with a circuit board that's got drop-in sensor inserts. So it's not like if a sensor fails, you can unscrew it from your manifold or whatever and replace it, but the reliability is really good. I mean, you're isolating them from vibration, so that's a plus. and it's a modular design. So like you can open up that billet block, just take the lid off of it. It's sealed with an O-ring. You can take that lid off, and then all the sensor cartridges, like the meat of the sensor itself, it just pulls out, and you can swap them out for 100 psi, 200 psi, 5 bar, uh, vacuum, absolute pressure. So they're slick. And so if you got one like mounted on your fender and your fuel pressure regulator, if it's like a mechanical pump, and your turbo are right in that proximity, then you can just remote mount some stainless lines to that block, and you got your fuel pressure and your dome pressure, and then like your map sensor all just neatly in one little corner. You got some lines to run, but um, it's a neat setup.
Ortiz, my buddy Ortiz, just posted a link to a what he thinks is a Volkswagen BMW sensor, and it's a 4-terminal oil pressure switch. It'll do pressure and temperature, and it is, how much is it, Chris? It doesn't say here. It's made by Intermodal. It seems like it'll be extremely cheap, but it's an O'Reilly part. It's probably $30.
I know what you're talking about. It's kind of like a T-map sensor.
Yeah, it's threaded, and it has a really big. Anyway, that's cool for probably how cheap that is.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. So, oh, this guy says my sensor shows 36 pounds of coolant pressure on 20 pounds. That's kind of scary. I said, what's more about your setup? Like, oh, he says, don't BS me, clone. Gen 2, 78, 75, 80E. I see about 18 pounds at hot idle. Wow. So that's a lot. Like,
That is a lot.
does your car overheat, or do you get garbage in your pressure, or does it cough up coolant juice every time you hit it? Because I've done 20 pounds on bigger turbos and not spit any coolant. So if you're
Yeah, I
emptying
mean,
like a quart every pass, anyway, that's
that's I mean, if it's not spiking, that's one thing, but it's still concerning.
36 seems like a lot, bud. Welded shut radiator cap.
Oof.
Are you joking? That's a different person. I think he's joking for him. Kyle
That,
Orsak says my sensor. I wonder if he's lying or not. No issues, doesn't push coolant. Wow, so it comes up 16 pounds at 20 pounds of boost. Now, what did he say? What the hell did he say? It sits at 18 pounds of coolant pressure, and then on 20 pounds, it goes to 36. That's a lot of rise. That's like almost 1-to-1.
yeah.
Wow, anyway. My
Huh.
radiator cap is 1.1 bar, which is roughly 16. So it is close. So your rag cap is 16, but man, I've done all stock stuff in that 2500 and it doesn't go over 13. It's like 10 or 13 hot and it doesn't go over that, even with 24 pounds through it. Interesting.
As a
Anyway,
but yeah.
I would do one of those tests, the purple strip or whatever, to see if there's combustion in your coolant.
That and do a leak down.
Yeah, that's the big one. I didn't know that existed till like a year ago that you can maybe it's sensor error people are saying. Yeah, that's interesting.
If it's not scaled right, I mean that's one thing.
That's scary, bud. 36
Yeah.
pounds in your coolant system. I would change out your cap for like a 12 pounder too. Man, that's a lot of coolant pressure for no reason in my opinion.
It is.
Wonder if it would be in the lower hose. I put it in the upper hose. Mine is in the upper hose too. I'd like to get more data on it. Is why I'm prodding you so much. Not that I'm cornering you with questions.
Yeah, no, and that's one thing that I need to get in more of, because I build the means for getting the data, but it's not often that I actually see the data. Like I said, I mean, most
Oh, it
of my
makes
guys are
sense.
not really local to here. Um, I haven't been to a track since 2018, so I'm
You're not
really,
missing anything.
yeah, I'm really hoping that this year is going to be a little different. So I do have some hot cars here in the local area that I'd like to travel around with as I can, but um, yeah, I mean it's important to get your hands on it and just be running with it, as I mean, to stay on top of stuff. So
They say, I like this guy, never taking apart a running engine, even if you have scary amount of coolant pressure. I said, if it's okay, it's okay, man. Oh yeah, this
Right.
guy says higher coolant pressure equals higher boiling point. But man, you shouldn't be anywhere near boiling water anyway, in my opinion. But again,
No.
I'm just opinionated YouTuber with a car hobby, so whatever.
Yeah.
All right, well, let me go back through here. Was there anything else you wanted to add to those sensors? Like you said, coolant pressure. Oh, what's the one that people need and don't want? Was that coolant pressure?
No, 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 no. Or well, need and don't. Okay, sorry. I thought
I
I had
did
that
this to
backwards.
you.
No, you're fine. I don't know. Honestly,
Can you think
I don't
of the
think.
useless sensor people want before you can think of the other one?
Yeah, the useful sensor was cooling system pressure, and honestly, I can't think of a good. It'll probably hit me about 2 a.m., but I can't think of a good example of a useless sensor. I mean, I don't really think there's any such thing as bad data. I mean, if it's accurate, but or like useless data. Gosh, because I mean, like I think that's just the thing in general. Like people think they don't need certain sensors, and it's like, well, no, you do. And then, but the big thing is like it's one thing to get the data, but then to figure out what to do with it after you get it, that's the kicker.
Hmm.
But like you said about transmissions, like converters have been coming a long way with everything going on with them. So I mean, a lot of guys are now monitoring cooling system charge pressure. Or wow, I need sleep. Converter charge pressure.
Oh no,
Uh,
yeah, because Low Dollar has that sensor. That's what I sent them. It's a 0
yes,
to 300 with pressure and temperature. So you
yes,
thread it into the one port and you get both, which is awesome.
yeah. I mean, normally what I will set up a any drag car, whether it be a no time heads up, no prep, whatever. I'll set up the transmission branch to have three leads in it, and I'll have GM style two pin for a temp sensor to put in the pan. Because that's one thing about those combo sensors. Like guys want to run them for oil pressure, oil temp. And like on a methanol car, that's a good thing. But like if you want temp, you want it in stagnant oil or coolant, whatever you're trying to get an accurate temp on. If you've got it in the flow, I mean, unless you go in like near the discharge that's going to the cooler, you're not going to get really good data on what your true temperature is. So I always recommend just putting a bung in the pan, doing your temp there. Then I'll put a regular 3-pin transducer, uh, sensor lead for putting just a regular transducer in the discharge line. So that's your transmission line pressure, and then I'll set it up for a combo sensor to go in the to put a sensor in the servo cap, and that's where you get your converter charge data from.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't know all that. Cameron will be interested in all that stuff since he does so much transmission stuff. Actually, that's cool. Does anybody do? I didn't think of that either. Man, Potato is always on the ball with ridiculous questions and smart questions. He says, "Does anybody put a sensor on a car for exterior humidity, air, sea level?" So, I mean, I would say Barrow, Holly ECUs have a barometer, so
They do.
you can kind of see air quality, but I don't think humidity or sea level is as easy, but if your barrow is really low, you know your air is garbage.
Yeah, and I've honestly, yeah, I knew they had that sensor, that little blue port that's sticking out of the potting. That's what that is. But I've never really known like because you can't can you leverage that sensor like through an ICF
What
and do
sensor?
anything with it?
I forgot what sensor we were just talking about. That's how
The
squirrel.
baro sensor, in a dominator. I don't think you can. That's some black magic stuff that might be. I don't know.
I am going to look at a V6 file right now.
Yeah, and that is really interesting. But like the one thing that I'm thinking of that comes to mind with that. So unless you are doing some crazy tour, um, going across the country from track to track and racing in
Rocky
different
Mountain Race Week
altitudes.
from the bottom of the mountain to the top, which, in my
Yeah,
assumption, closed loop is going to easily cover the fuel offset.
that's true. But
Um,
yeah, I mean, unless you're going into different regions with different at different altitudes, and I don't see that you would really need that. But as far as a humidity sensor,
I don't really know what you would use it for. You could more than likely, uh, you can use baro as an offset. You can
yeah,
use it
here's an
to,
int-
you can use barometer to trigger things in an advanced table, and
mhm.
I think you can do. You can scale by fuel flow and air fuel target offset by barometer.
Okay,
You can use barometer as an offset in a dominator anyway. That's actually pretty cool. So I hope that answers your question there,
it is
potato.
cool. Yeah, so Rocky Mountain Race Week guys, take notes there. That's interesting.
You could, if your closed loop was like 15%, you can change your fuel multiplier based off of barometer if you cared to do so. Oh, this
Hmm.
is a guy, Bastards Inc. gave me $4.99. Thank you very much. He says, Matt, what's the most haggard delaminated gasket you've bolted back on an engine, and how did it pan out? And then Ryan, what's your favorite car movie? Well, I have pulled head gaskets off the floor in my attic, off of the floor in my dirty garage. Some even had like pieces of little stone in them, and I've thrown them back on. One of my cars with the most reused gaskets and dirtiest gaskets ever was the Colorado when it made almost 1100 rear wheel. And that had like the most disgusting head gaskets because I took them off 15 times and put them back on. So then what's your favorite car movie?
Okay, I got one thing I want to come back to on this borrow and humidity thing.
Yeah.
So don't let me get off topic on that. But car movie, God, I'm not much of a TV and movie guy, especially anymore. Um, I don't know. As far as like what pushed me on this path, just one thing that's coming to mind from God, I don't know if it's high school or college years blend together, but like I remember watching Death Race. You ever seen that?
Is that with Jason Statham?
He was in one of them, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I mean, and I'm terrible with actors too,
I
but I
never watched
remember,
them, but I know they exist. So let's put it that
yeah.
way.
And so like they've got it's kind of like this Mad Max shit going on where they've got I mean like Mustangs with armored plating and machine guns sticking out the windshield and I mean, I remember watching that movie not for the movie. I mean, obviously the nobody watches that movie for the writing. Um,
Exactly.
but I remember seeing all those cars. I mean, because they were real cars and not CG. And I was like, damn, like you think about it, behind the scenes, there's a crew that built those cars.
Like Mad Max, incredible.
Yeah,
Those are real
Mad,
driving cars. I was blown away when I heard that.
right. I mean, Mad Max, Fast and Furious. If you want to go into those, I know everybody loves those movies, but I would watch movies like that and see that, and I remember like when there was career day and stuff in high school, like where do you want to go to college? And I said like I wanna build cool race cars or like cars for movies, and they're like, we have no what? I don't know where to put you.
I
Tell
want
me
to
you want
build the cars that were in PlayStation Twisted Metal from when I was
right.
13.
And oh, Monster Garage, that was a big one for me as a kid. That's
Oh
not a
yeah,
movie, but
super cool.
I loved that show. Um, I was pretty pumped to see they brought it back, but I haven't watched anything else with that.
I like that too because he would get pissed and be like, "You're all done. Just leave. The
Yeah,
project's canceled. Go home. You all argue too much. Get out of here." And I'm like, "That's cool. Why
yeah,
should they deal with it?"
right. Um, yeah, so
You
that's
said
that's
you
what I got.
wanted to get back to barometer.
Yes, so here's something interesting that might be something to look into for especially like for the sloppy stuff. So the Gen 5 LT
I was
mass
gonna
airflow
say this. I was gonna
there,
say I know it's a
yeah,
hygrometer built in.
there is, yeah,
It's like
because
an
like
8 wire mass air meter.
yep, the first time I messed with one of those, I'm like, why are there 8 wires here? And then
Me
I never,
too. I was
yeah,
like, I had an LS7 plug, and it has
mhm,
that tiny, but I was like, why are there so many pins? And I read up on it too.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting to see what could be done with that.
Because people were asking, would it be cool to add a mass air meter and like a LS3, LS7 style drop in? I want to actually put on my Mustang just for fun to see airflow on some things.
Yeah,
I've thought about it, but I think it's tough to scale one because the stock computer, you know, if your scale is wrong, everything's wrong. But
yeah,
on these, you'd have to get a calibration from like PMAS, like where Corey Johnson has done work on and off. You would need to be like, I need an entire frequency scale for a 4.5 inch tube for a LS7 meter that I can input into a Holly, and then you would get correct mass air meter data, unless you already have it like Gail Banks has on that stuff.
yeah. Or if you want to spend a weekend of testing, I mean, take the cross section of your intake charge pipe and then just interpolate it with your boost curve and
Or use like SolidWorks and have someone flow it. But they have, he's shown me the test bench at PMAS that has like a mile of PVC tubing to straighten out
mhm,
the airflow as smooth as possible to do calibrations on mass air meters.
that's cool.
It is pretty cool. Even though I hate mass air meters, I can appreciate the work and responsibility in programming them.
I agree. But yeah,
And then humidity. What a. I don't think humidity has any use. I don't think barometer has much use unless you're doing a Pikes Peak car. But I'd love to ask one of those people that tunes one of those from the bottom
mhm,
of Pikes Peak to the top. What's the closed loop and barometer look like? Is it just 5%? You don't need it anyway. And if so, do they? If that's a 0 to 8,000 feet per se, I can't remember exactly what it is. Do they
yeah,
tune for 4,000 feet and just let it correct low and high from there? Do they go off a zero midway and just let it eat either way? Obviously,
mhm.
denser air down low would add closed loop, and up top it would probably take it away because less density. Or would it be all the same and none of it matters and they're laughing at me right now if they watch this?
Well, yeah, and like you said, I think your closed loop would take care of a lot of it. But that's what's so cool to see about other. I mean, just the way that other forms of racing use stuff in so differently. Um, Somebody asked that question. I think it was Potato. It was a few up, but it was about breaking out into other classes and other types of racing. Um,
Oh, because
and
both of us are primarily around drag racing.
yeah, and I will answer that. Actually, that's something I've thought about a lot lately. But I mean, and I think drag racing for both of us is just kind of a product of our geographic location.
Yes, I have in like
Um,
a perfect area for drag racing also.
yeah, so
Northeast.
and I love it. So, but I something that is kind of a pipe dream for me. I would really enjoy touching like a trophy truck or a desert racer,
Me too.
but I
That's a
don't want to
good
move to
question,
Arizona right
actually. That's a good question. What would you like to tune? Because I've done Formula SAE cars, and I've
now.
done a lot of road race cars because Pocono Raceway is right up the street from me.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the guys that race there live right next to it. And a lot of them are like, surprisingly, not surprisingly to people that know, are all C5s or very modified C5s. So they all eventually hurt the LS6 or LS1, and then they get like an AccuSump or a dry sump system, and then they buy like a Texas Speed 408. And a lot of these guys are all talking to each other, and they all run the Texas Speed 408. And I've made like 520 rear wheel very conservatively on like 91 octane. And all of those survive road racing for like 2 hours. So I must be doing something right there.
Yeah.
Would you build a Baja car? I'll bring a Fairmont chassis.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk. I've got a fair amount coming in a few months. Actually, that one's gonna be interesting.
Oh man, I
Um,
love those cars. Some jerk made them too expensive though now.
yeah. Yeah. But this one's got the new Godzilla 7.3 in it, so
Oh,
I'm
that's
super
cool.
for that one.
I think that's cool. I watched a video. If you don't know, Palm Beach Dyno did a video the other day where they have a bolt-on one they've been messing with as software keeps getting unlocked, and they did a small camshaft in theirs on the dyno and then re-dynoed it.
Hmm.
And I was just cringing at the amount of stuff they had to remove based off of an LS. Because I thought it would be like, cool, a big LS.
Yeah.
It has a front cover just like a Coyote, and it has like all this. It's miles of stuff to take off. I was like, ugh. I was cringing because people always like, they see a bare LS and they're like, man, there's so much stuff on that. I'm like, it hardly moves from naked to having all the accessories. And then
Yeah.
everything can come off without interfering everything nearly. Ask him about
Well,
S10s.
they got one step right, eliminating doing a one cam delete.
Yes, one cam. That's what everyone's
So
happy about.
yeah,
I love all the Ford guys that were like, they stole it from Ford and dual overhead cam is the future, and then Ford makes the single cam again, and they're all
yeah.
like, yeah, that's big block Ford. They all like, they all jumped right back to cam and block. Well,
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, and GM did extensive like when they were in the prototyping phase of the LS in the mid '90s. There were a couple prototype engines that were overhead cam, and
I believe it, like offshore shit too.
yeah. So
So what was someone was asking? Can you guys explain why mass air meters suck? Well, in a stock application, I think they're fantastic. It takes 2 seconds to tune one that's already calibrated on a car that has no issues. But I think a lot of forced induction cars have way too turbulent of air to get most of them right. It's a pain in the ass to tune them. And then I think a bunch of stuff that's blow through instead of draw through. If it has a lot of airflow, like a turbo LS car, the airflow can swing around so much, and the
mhm.
PE based ECU, like it won't trigger PE, but it'll run 10 pounds at a 9.0 air fuel. But if you floor it, it'll have a good air fuel. But if it's building boost on the highway, like you can't get a happy medium sometimes. And then if you're doing draw through, the way the math works doesn't like to do draw through. That's just my opinion. It's a lot of like guesswork, and then your ignition table's based off of load instead of pressure. It's a lot to get right when you if you can just do it off of a pressure table, it makes more sense in my opinion. What's yours?
So again, I am not the tuner here.
Oh,
So
okay.
I appreciate you for eloquently unpacking that. And I agree with every point you have, and you expanded on them massively from my understanding. So
Yeah,
no,
that's
I
what
think
I've run into. So
that's a really good explanation for it. As a wiring guy, I don't like them because it's one other thing to wire, and it just adds clutter. And generally, like the pro touring guys I'm working with that are still wanting to run a stock ECU because it just fits the bill. I'm like, well, if you want to do a nice looking charge pipe and have your engine base simple looking, then like let's just tune this thing speed density and clean it up and be done. And I'm like, okay.
the other
So
really big point that people might not understand is if anything goes wrong in your airflow amount between the meter and your throttle fuel source, you're getting unmetered air and everything is off because your
yeah,
fuel dependency is the airflow going through the MAF. So if you have a leak, if it's a draw through setup like a Subaru and it's boost leaking somewhere, the car runs awful because say it's metering 300 horsepower worth of air and it's dumping 100 horsepower worth of air somewhere, you have like the percentage of fuel that's in there is drastically high, so the car is just blowing it out like a diesel. And then a lot of times, if you knock a charge pipe, you can't even drive the car. The
yeah,
MAF signals. It thinks like there's so much air coming in and a boost, like a intercooler pipe, just blowing it out. It's awful. So a MAP sensor car, you can rip everything off the front end of the motor and it'll still run fine.
yeah, and that's a very good point. That it's just one other thing to fail. Like I remember having a conversation with a guy that had a rock bouncer. Um, and he was having problems with the PO1 in the mass airflow. Because
Knocking the filter off, bouncing probably.
that I think was part of it, and then he was having like rough startups, and because a lot of his stuff was like done really early in the day, where dew hadn't quite set in, or he was in like a very humid uh, environment,
Hmm.
and I think the humidity was messing with it too, from what I was getting. But
A lot of people say, this is a tuning opinion, a lot of people say that the meter better picks up on air density changes, but a barometer throws that all out the window.
it does.
So people are like, well, if it's colder, you're getting more air density and a meter compensates. And I'm like, well, if it's a half decent ECU, it has a barometer and a map sensor and it's measuring the delta and compensating. And
Hmm.
people are like, oh. So a meter is cool, I think, but ultimately useless. For Gale Banks, I think it makes a lot of sense because that guy's doing so much. But for a drag car, it doesn't make much sense. There's some good questions here that I wanted to go over, and then we'll go to Potato again because he has another fantastic one. Oh, this says, how do factory misfire counters work? Could a Terminator do that? Well, you said you're not much of a stock computer or tuner at all. And what's funny is the misfire counter doesn't really work with a cam. What it's doing is it's measuring knock or slowness on a rotation. So if it's rotating at, say, so many pulses per minute, if it's slowing down in between those, it can tell the cylinder because it's a sequential engine. That's my understanding. Is it can see skips in an otherwise smooth tachometer output wheel. So
Hmm.
it'll see, and then it goes and it has like an offset, and it knows that that was cylinder five's ignition event, and it blipped. That's how I understand it. And then someone else was saying, oh, other, where is it? I can't find it now, but it's other engines you would work on besides, I do mostly LS. Engine platforms you would want to do non LS. So you probably wire stuff that's non LS, or is it most of your business?
I mean, a lot of it is LS. Mod Motor has actually been closely following the LS stuff, but I like getting into other stuff. Um, it's pretty cool as long as we're not trying to like do a factory reproduction harness or like do something like that. I mean, there's nuanced stuff with routing that you got to figure out on every new engine. But I do like doing different stuff. So I mean, probably the ones I get the most satisfaction out of anymore are the guys that are doing EFI conversions on like your conventional headed small block Ford, small block Chevy, big block. I've done a lot of turbo and pro charge stuff with them, and it's just neat. Um, I've got a 2J. I've done a few things for 2JZs. I've gotten some RB requests that just haven't formulated yet. So I've done some pretty neat stuff. And one interesting thing that actually this is an interesting one that might trip your trigger. I've got an '80s Nissan pickup with the Z24 four-cylinder, and it's carbureted distributor. It's got 8 spark plugs,
Huh.
one distributor. It's weird, but it's just a fun little truck. And I thought about LS swapping it, but um, I think the front end is so I don't want to keep I want to keep the front end light, and the front end is so short. I'd have to move the radiator to put either an LS or a 2J in it. So I think I'm going to convert the stock engine over to EFI, put like Haltech 950 on it, and turbo it, and have some fun. So if anybody wants some content on that, let me know. But I think that'll be a fun project. So
So, well, this is a dyno question. Joe Simpson would be a good guy to answer this. He's not on this chat, though. Potato says, is there a way to measure torque in real time on a dyno? All the load cell ones, like Dynapacks and hub dynos, will tell you torque in real time. And I believe you can tell them to hold a torque value, and you can tell them to hold an RPM, you can tell them to hold a horsepower value. So you can very easily stop one of those engines and read. A lot of times when they are tuning, which I would love to have one. And with a stick shift car, you can do this especially. You can tell it to hold 2,000 RPM and you can go wide open and you can move the spark advance to figure out the perfect amount of brake torque at that RPM at wide open. So you can do like an immediate brake torque table just because you can stop the engine from accelerating completely. And someone
Yeah,
goes, "Oh, go."
no, I was just gonna say that's pretty cool.
It is. Hub dynos are incredible.
Hmm.
Uh, what customers are the worst, Mod Motor or LS? And Killswitch says broke customers, and I agree. I don't think there's any field of people that are good or bad, but it's
No,
people who have poor expectations, including something for nothing, or yeah, all of that above, of
so
course.
stock ECU guys
Stock
is what
ECU guys.
that's the answer to that. Because and those guys, those are the ones I've weeded out because yeah, those are the ones that
They want to have their cake and eat it too with zero functionality.
they do, and it just comes from a lack of perspective, really, and a lack of experience. And a lot of these guys that are coming to me, not that like I'm some big timer or um, whatever, but they're spending more money than they've ever spent in their life, and so they're just looking at that dollar sign, I think, and it kind of scares them, and yeah, and they just they don't know what they're getting into, and it's so those are the guys that have 50 questions at the beginning, 50 questions in the middle, 50 questions in the end, and then in the end they're still not happy with something that I have no control over. But on the flip side, that's proven a really good learning experience because I think like as a business owner or a service provider, it is my responsibility to filter down what realistic expectations are, plant those with the customer, and if they don't agree with it, then they can go find somebody else to do it, whatever. But once those expectations are set, then deliver on them.
Or what
And
people always say is price yourself in the middle. Price yourself kind of high so that if people say okay, it's worth it, or it weeds people out that don't understand or don't think it's affordable.
yeah, and I've been playing that game too and making my way through that one.
He says, ease them down softly. I have learned over the years that people don't know what they want. Here's the thing.
Yes.
I think I'm in a really good situation because I complain and I bitch and I grandstand and soapbox about so much. If people watch it and then they want me to tune their car, they already know everything I'm going to be pissed about. They already know everything they shouldn't do. So I'm in a really fortunate situation most of the time where people they know or they have something and I'm like, what's this? And I go, and they go, I know. They already know, like they know. So it's not a problem most of the time with that stuff.
Well,
Uh,
that's transparency, and that's good.
yeah, and that's what people will travel a long way, and it upsets me sometimes because I'm like, I'm sure there's someone qualified near you, but they're like, well, I like what you do, and I trust that if you don't even know, you will tell me you don't know because they've been places where you have to drop off your car and then they shrug and then you come pick it up and it's $1,200 and they're like, well, we couldn't do much. And they're
Hmm.
like, so, there's that whole what happened and why am I paying so much money? And was it difficult or are you ripping me off or is it a middle? And that's difficult, right? So, but
Yeah.
then most shops can't have someone standing around. They're working on 12 things at once. There's all of that. That's what I try to do too when we talk about like a bunch of this radio show. I wanted to be telling about shop owners and what they have to deal with, and again, expectations and what people think everyone's trying to rip them off, especially like plumbers and contractors. And I'm like,
Yeah.
just for them to come to your house costs money, and then you want a quote for nothing, and then you're going to call six more, and then you're going to try to do it yourself, and then
Mhm.
everybody jokes about that. There's those signs where it says to do a good job $10 an hour, to fix a job you did 25 an hour, for you to watch
Yes.
me while you do the job $75 an
Uh,
hour. Yeah, like they're highlighting the most awful thing you can do as a customer and pricing you accordingly. So yeah.
and it's so true. And it's always the stock ECU guys that put on that GM service tech hat and try to dig up their own wiring diagrams on Wikipedia and then come back to me, oh, well, I read this, so why'd you do this way? It's like, just no, just leave it alone. And
Yeah. You
uh,
don't, yeah, that's the stock computer tuning aspect of it, dude. You're lucky you don't have any of that taking up space in your brain at all. It is disgusting, and one day I hope I forget most of it. Uh,
I'll pray for you.
you pray. What is, oh, this is a good one. Again, oh, this, he says we love you for it, which I grandstanded about grandstanding and everyone. But that's the only reason why people watch. I'm not attractive, and I'm not. I don't clickbait, and I don't yell "What's up, guys?" and I don't have much fancy over here. So they're watching because they like to hear me bitch. But
It's good.
I think there is a good. My buddy Arnie says there's a good. I represent that person well because I have nothing to lose, and I'll say whatever I want, even if I'm wrong, and then I'll admit it. Doesn't matter to me. And everybody's too afraid to do that. I mean, rightfully so. You can get your business ruined on the internet in 3 seconds.
You can.
So
And
they can't say stuff, and when people are upset, they can't reason with them, and that's, bad.
oh yeah. Well, and I think attitude has a lot to do with that because like honestly, like I said, just I've been guilty of taking on way too much at once and overfilling my plate and burning myself out for it. And so like I've had my share of uh like things shipping out late and not getting done on expectation as expected. And I think there's other companies out there that do the same thing. I won't name names, but I try, and again, I'm a one man show. I've got 2 kids at home, and I've had a fairly demanding full time job up until yesterday. And so it's not always the easiest to get a hold of me. And I try to be on top of communication and stuff, but it's not easy. But like,
I'm the worst at it. That's why I try to tell people always want to contact me, and I'm like, man, just so you know, it's an uphill battle because I have a lot of stuff going on, and this is fun for me. So if you sound like a pain in the ass at all, I can't get back to you. It might be 3 or 4 weeks before I even like reply to your email, or at all.
yeah,
If I
before you even
do,
read it. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not justifying it, but it's reality. And
unfortunately, yeah. At a time,
yeah.
I was scheduled so far out I couldn't do anything on my own, and I was like,
Mhm.
well, this isn't fun either.
No, it's not. And I mean, so but like when guys come back to you like frustrated because something's late or whatever, I mean like the best thing you can do is just acknowledge it and accept your fault and mitigate it, where there's other people out there that like dig their heels in and double down and shoot back with the customer and just be a dick. And those are the guys that I see just getting ripped apart on social media all the time, and like you can't wonder why. So
People frequently are like, Matt, why are you doing this to this person? And I'm like, here's the whole story. And then they're like, oh, yeah, that guy's a douchebag. And I'm like, yeah, all they would have to say is something simple or apologize or I was wrong
yeah,
this one time. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. But they're incapable of doing that. And yeah, that's why I like to like you have admitted growth many times. If I ever had someone on here and I was like, if they were never admitting faults, I would be like, what's the worst mistake you made this last year? And if they're like none, I'd be like, you are so full of shit.
yeah,
We're gonna hang up on you soon and get somebody on here that won't lie. Thanks.
yeah.
Here's
No, one thing, and I saw this recently, and I thought this was so accurate. It was like a line graph, and on the X you had
someone posted it
competence.
on Sloppy. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah, competence versus confidence, and it was like in the first ten
Confidence, and then it
percent,
was like whoom, and
it's
then
like
it's
I know
slowly.
everything. Oh, I'm an idiot, and then it slowly gets back up, and it's like I know what I'm doing, but I do know my limits too, and it's so accurate.
Yeah, I felt the same. I cannot disagree with that at all. I'm like, man, everyone's so dumb, and then I'm like, man, I know nothing, and then I'm like, man,
Yeah.
I know what to do, but these people know way more in certain situations.
Well, I think the more you understand that you don't know, it shows the more that you truly do know.
Yeah, like we said the same thing with like Robert. said the same thing. It's that classic: the more you know, the more you know you don't know.
Yeah, it's true. So the guys out there that's saying like that are like I'm the expert, like that's a guy you don't want to talk to unless you can see something to back it up.
And I
So
say that a lot too. Don't ever go to a place that has a badmouth people to put themselves up or to sell you something. There's a
yes,
lot, it's majority of places. Like you have a service, people know what you do, show what you do well to bring in people. If you're doing something well, you don't have to talk down to anybody, which is funny because that I eat my own words like that all the time. But I'm going to try to defend myself and be like, it feels different. I'm not selling anybody anything. And when I think someone's bullshitting, I say it first. And then when they can give me a reason, I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. You seem like a nice guy, and that's a valid reason. But
yeah,
my first reaction is like a punch, like an insult almost. Sometimes it is a blatant insult, and then
yeah,
gauging how they unfairly most of the time. Sure, I'll admit, but it's my knee jerk is like, hey, so you don't know what you're doing, and they can laugh or they can get offended, and most people realize that angle and that they can't be mad and be a jerk and whatever. Unfortunately, I
yeah.
can, but I don't ever get
Oh
mad
yeah,
at people. I'm just like, it sounds like you don't know what you're doing.
right. And I mean, I try to stay in my lane where like if someone brings a car in, I'm not welding on it or anything like that. But just I mean, just with everything, I mean, the way to get better with it is just through practice. But yeah, to your point about selling, like I'm not a sales guy. I don't want to be a sales guy, and I will never claim to be. I usually guys that call themselves sales guys, I don't get along with them. But like I just do my thing, and if it's something that adds value to somebody else, I'll let it speak for itself. Like I don't. I'll gladly, if anybody inquires about something, I try to just ask the questions to make sure it's a fit, and if it's not, I'll tell them no. Like if this isn't what you want, but I offer this, or like no, that like this isn't gonna be what you want in the end. Um, so yeah, I try to stay humble in that regard and just let my work speak for itself. That's why I've been very quiet on social media lately, and a lot of that's had to do with just I've been busy. But again, like I've had no shortage of work to do whatsoever. So it's been I'm pretty blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good one, and I think this is a good. What does Ryan have an encyclopedia of knowledge on that is not car related? Like, is he big into weird and unique video games from the 80s or a history buff? That's Potato R33 again. I said he asks like an intelligent car related question, no offense, and then he asks, what's your favorite 80s video game, you know?
Yeah, no, that's insightful. I don't know. I mean,
Like a
kind
hobby
of.
that people wouldn't think you do being in a cars or anything like that, or not at all.
Oh shit.
We can come
I
back, we
don't
can
know.
circle back.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I just kind of live, sleep, and breathe race cars, and that's what I've been doing since. I mean, for the past 5 years. I mean, I've I don't really have any hobbies that I'm deep into. I mean, like I've got guns. I shoot recreationally on occasion. Not now that I can't really get my hands on any ammo, and I don't have time to use it even if I did. But I don't play many video games anymore. Like I said, I'm not into movies. I'm big into music. That's about the biggest thing that I stay deep into.
Oh man, people are gonna be throwing that one down next. Favorite band, favorite whatever. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's about all I have to say on that one.
People are commenting about what I said. I don't know why people listen to me at all. And they go, we love you for it, like bitching and making fun of people or making fun of myself most often. And
Yeah.
this, I talked about people driving for forever, and I don't understand it. And this guy says, I would nearly drive from Michigan for a hoople tune. People have done that. I had a guy the other day bring his car, and I was like, "Hey, where'd you come from?" And he's like, "Michigan." He drove through a snowstorm, and I was like, don't ever do that again.
Wow.
Please don't
Yeah.
ever do that again." People are asking, "What's your favorite kind of pepper?"
I'm I'm a pretty boring guy, actually.
You
Like
can
I
just
don't.
decline because you're like, I don't have an answer for that. I'm sorry.
I like the green ones. I use them in cooking.
That's a great answer. I like the green ones. Boom.
Yeah,
What's
but I'm
what's
not
your
big on the hot stuff.
what's your best social awkwardness tools to work on? I don't know what that is. I have so
All of
many.
them. All of them.
All of them. This
Yeah.
this is a good one. Potato asked this in a bunch of the videos. What's the biggest hammer you have in your shop and will show to us right now? He had asked
No,
Robert that, and Robert's like, blah blah hammer. It was hilarious.
yeah, I don't know, I've got like a 2 pound mini sledge that I use on occasion, but I mean, never on, usually never on customers' cars. If I'm using that on somebody's car that they bring to me, then we've got problems. But I mean, I get my hands dirty with my own stuff on occasion. Like I said, I don't really have time for much of that anymore. I've been pretty fortunate enough to be able to have my hands in other people's stuff that's fast, and so that keeps me occupied. And I'd much rather do that than build my own car, because for me, I enjoy building more than I enjoy driving. I mean, I've got kind of a list of cars I on my bucket list, I guess. I mean, it's fairly short and just projects I'd like to do for myself, but I've got an S10 in here that I'd
Ugh.
like to do.
Ugh. Oh, sorry, what? An S10? No, sorry.
It's a second gen. It's a round body.
Oh, whatever.
Come on.
I hate those things, but sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, you're good. But I mean, it's
You
if
know
I
the
have that,
owners. You have one. You know the owners. They're the worst part. The car is fine.
those, yeah, that guy, God. Um, but no, I mean, that's I don't even remember what the question was. Where was I going with this?
Well, I'll just say another one quick. All I got out of all this is because people expect you to be married to their projects, and you just hope they can try to learn from you, and only if they come to you when it's really, really difficult. Hmm. Customers don't even try to learn simple things.
Yeah.
I hate Corvette owners. What are the cars behind you? They look like collectibles.
Oh, they're nothing special, just a bunch of
Hot Wheels or something.
124, 125 models.
Oh.
So I've got some. So my it was third gens that I had when I was in high school and college. So I've got a couple of like SCCA Budweiser IROC cars from that a buddy of mine found at a flea market bought for me.
Oh man,
Um,
third gen.
third gen, yeah. The orange one in the middle up there, that's a GTO. My dad's first car was a 68 GTO, so it's just a model I built when I was in high school, and yeah, they're nothing special. There's a few in there that are just not even started. It's just the body unpainted, and I was big into those model cars in high school, and I'd like to get back to some of those eventually and play with them, but uh, for now they just sit there and something to fill space.
Nice. Uh, are you a wagon guy or are you wrong?
I love wagons. I love wagons. I've had some cool thoughts on wagons. There's some things that'd be pretty cool to do. The I love them and I appreciate them, but especially when you get into the old ones, you realize what a bitch they are. Because the car that I dropped the tank out of and burned myself, it was a 62 Ford Galaxy
Oh
wagon,
man,
and that thing was pretty. I mean,
that's
it
a
like
real car.
that's a real car. Like getting it up on Jackson's, it's like, damn, this thing's a 3/4 ton truck.
Yep.
But yeah, that was a really cool build. Again, I like them, but I found more and more I like things that are small and light and nimble. Hence why I've got this stupid Nissan pickup. And um, yeah, like I do like wagons. I don't know if I'll ever own one for that reason, but I love them. They're cool.
I would say like I'm the anti. I think they're cool, but people want way too much money, or a lot of them are ugly, or they're just too heavy, or they seem like they'll be cool and they're not, or the platform is so old it's not useful as a daily or a race car and you have to gut it anyway. I'm very conflicted. And then the other part of me is a total hipster because people are like, oh, wow, a wagon, and they want it, so I don't.
Yeah,
I don't know
I
what's wrong with me.
no, I can understand all of those points. The cool ones that I see is just where I mean they build it because they got it, and they're not like oh it's a wagon, like it's a wagon, like yeah it's just their car and it's a wagon and it's cool. And because like a lot of those things like you see like I've got a buddy with a Volvo wagon that's LS swapped in that, and that'll be neat. But I mean, and he's doing some pretty cool stuff with it. But I mean, he's not like a wagon jerker, so it'll just be cool to see it. But
Not a wagon jerker.
you like that?
Oh, man. Oh, Codeman Rose says bedtime. That's the guy that was doing the Arduino or other microcontroller in the stock case PO1 stuff. He's still doing it, I should say. But
Okay.
I think that's cool as a project, and I question its validity. But on top of that, there's nothing I would like to see more than him succeed and make that something fruitful out of that, like a S300 or something. Eventually,
Oh yeah.
what I
I
have
mean,
always thought would be cool is taking like a micro squirt module or an MS3 module. They sell the bare module board. Putting that in is much better because firmware exists. It's already meant for fuel injection. You could very easily take an input and put it to a pin on the PO1. But then again, the other part of me is like, why not replace the entire PO1 with whatever? But then the other part of me realizes the tuning aspect for Spark and everything else. But then I'm like, why aren't you just integrating a Terminator? Because you're going to spend $1 million trying to solder all that. You know,
well,
like I said, it's conflicting.
and that yeah, at that point, and I honestly I hate them,
Yeah,
and
garbage.
it's kept me away from them. But at that point, it's like why don't just build a patch harness and be done with it?
Yeah,
To
I tried to get another reason why I got in touch with you at some point. I was asking people to manufacture a PO1 female connector
yeah, it'd be
because
nice if
no one
it
it doesn't exist.
it doesn't no, and I've got God, I've got a buddy over in Wisconsin that produces harnesses, and he and I are kind of on the same path. But of all things, he's doing harnesses for Dodge Neons.
Where
I'm
does
gonna
he
let
live? Where does he live?
Wisconsin.
Kinetic Creations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Jay. He's a good dude.
He makes my
Um,
harnesses.
what's that?
He makes mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my
I didn't
Holly
know that.
plug and play stuff. I
Yeah.
worked out all the working versions of it and then I handed it off to him because I couldn't keep up with them at all.
Yeah.
So
He's
I drop ship all of my stuff from him because they're so fantastic looking. I obviously don't make them.
I was I've seen that you did like the flex fuel tap harnesses and stuff, and I kind of wondered, but no, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, he does
Um,
so many neon stuff. It's
yeah,
I asked him what his main thing was, and he's like, "Dude, Dodge neon stuff." I'm
and
like,
you're like, what?
"Really?" He said last year
Yeah,
I was his number 3 customer. I was like, "Dang."
interesting.
Yeah.
But no, he's the guy that talked me into getting my automated wire cutter stripper machine.
He showed me
And
videos of that making my harnesses. He's like
yeah,
he told me the crazy amount, like not working the tool hard so it would last. It could do like 1,000 in an hour or something ridiculous. And then it
yeah,
sonic welds the wires and everything else, and I'm like, this is blowing my mind.
yeah. He went out and bought a sonic welder, and I mean those things cost like 25 plus grand. And so he's always low key bragging on that on some of the motorsport wiring pages
He
and
showed me
everything.
immediately, and I was like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
That's why
yeah,
you're doing it.
Yeah, everyone's like, okay, you got a sonic welder, get over yourself. But no, super cool dude. He's very much a nerd in the process, and so I give him that. I mean, in the best way possible. But why did I bring him up? What were we just we get off on tangents
This
pretty
is my
quick here.
life. I squirrel.
Yeah.
Can someone tell us where we started before before this happened? I think you were probably saying something, and I was like, "Bam!" And then we both went there, and we can't get back. We didn't leave breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good. We might as well answer this right away. What's your daily driver, and will it do a burnout?
Okay, everybody get their tomatoes ready. My daily driver is a Prius.
Oh, that's wonderful.
No, yeah, I just went out and I got myself a 2015 Prius.
So economical. I think that's what people are surprised to hear from me too.
Yeah, so I mean, it's my family. We had them as family cars when I was through middle school and high school, and the second one my parents had. I mean, farm family, three kids, got the absolute shit beat out of it. And then when I was driving about 70 miles one way for a commute, I bought it for my parents, and then my family beat the shit out of it again for however long. I mean, several years. And when I got rid of that car just a couple years ago, it had 240,000 on it. It was had about half the rust as what you would expect on a GM car in this region of the country. And the only reason I sold it is because I didn't have time to fix it. And the only problem it had was bad wheel bearings. So, I mean, in the entire lifespan of that car, all I ever had to do to it was oil changes, brakes, tires, wheel bearings. That's it. I mean, they're indestructible. It's Toyota. I mean, they're just good cars.
Well,
And I I could get on a soapbox and go on and on and on about the electric cars and the hybrids and like I claim no good karma for driving a hybrid car. I know like I'm all for preserving natural resources and the environment, but like I know like if you understand where a lithium battery comes from for an electric car or a hybrid, then you know your electric car is not doing any good for
you're
the
not
environment.
saving the
So
world, yeah.
you're not. So shut the hell up.
That's just like
But
because I'm an IT guy. People talk about cloud computing,
yeah,
and I'm like, it's just someone else's computer.
yeah.
It's off your computer on another computer. Doesn't it's not vaporized in the atmosphere. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but
There's no free lunch.
there's no free lunch exactly. Uh,
So
did they ask both of us? I think a lot of I have two Kia Souls.
oh yeah, yeah, and yeah, you've done work with those things. They
I
work harder than most trucks out there.
Oh man, I love them. I got like 20 yards of mulch the other day from a landscaping place up the street, and they were just laughing. And then after like the fifth load, they're like, "Holy shit!" And then I was there for like another 15 after that, and they're like, "What?" And I would say, because my trailer is I have a trailer for it. Obviously, I think I've had three for it, and my latest one is a 3x5 by whatever, but it's exactly a cubic yard, and that's what most landscaping stuff is sold as: stone,
Yep.
mulch. So it's exactly a scoop of like a medium bucket or whatever, and I pick up stuff with it all the time. And when I walk in the door, they're like, "Oh, a Kia load of mulch." I'm like, "Yes, yes, ma'am." And then they're like,
One Kia.
"Man, that thing works hard," because a guy with like a 3500 Cummins rolls in and gets one scoop, and then like I'm
Yep.
there with my Kia and I get a scoop, and he's like, they're like, "What?" A lot of them are like, "Wow, that's a good idea," but yeah. It absolutely will do a burnout. I have a crazy burnout pictures from my Kia. People think it's fake because it's just pouring out of the front end. It looks like a pro mod Honda. But yeah, Prius is a fantastic car. It's an appliance, right?
It's practical, yeah.
What do you care? That's why people are. I think they're surprised when I'm like, I have this Kia and I love it, and they like
Yeah.
laugh, and I'm like, it's a washing machine that's nothing but good at washing clothes. It's incredible at washing clothes. Because like
Right.
you said, I have like 325,000 on my 13 Kia I bought new. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
owe me a penny. And
Right.
same thing, gas, tires, and brakes, which it needs those in like 40,000 mile increments.
Hmm.
It doesn't tear anything up. The only thing I've done, I did a wheel bearing in the front left because I drive it alone all the time.
Yeah.
So all the other ones are okay. And then, yeah, that thing has never had an easy day in its life at all. So it has, get this, it has the stock accessory belt. That's what I
Okay.
try to tell people. I'm like, it has the stock accessory belt still. That's how
Yeah.
reliable this damn car is.
And that's good.
It doesn't even squeal or anything. It has the damn stock accessory belt. I'm like, it'll probably break tomorrow, but
Yeah.
it has the same accessory belt from 2013.
Yeah. So circling back to the wagon thing, the
Yes.
car the car I just got rid of when I bought this one was a HHR with a stick with a 5 speed.
My friend had one of those and it was incredibly unreliable.
Yeah, this one wasn't bad, but I mean I just I yeah, I've been dumping money into it left and right, and finally got the infamous fuel leak that they all get, the Cobalt to HHRs. And I was just like, I could spend $1,000 to fix this, or I could send it down the road before the next thing happens
And get a
and get
Prius.
something. And yeah, so
What
that's
do you
what I did.
average in that? My buddy Keith gets like 54.
So with my heavy foot and a lot of interstate driving at about 78 to 80 mile an hour, as of right now, my latest average has been 40, 46.
Awesome. It really is.
Yeah.
That's why I always laugh. People laugh about economy cars, but I laugh
Mhm.
about people driving unloaded trucks all day.
Yeah, it's like I don't need to convey my personality in my car,
Yeah, I
and
don't need
what's
to
going
make up
to
for
be
shortcomings with the size of my truck. My Dodge Ram with Flowmasters. I'm taking a swing at Dodge owners right now.
the size of your what?
Oh yeah, I don't think I said that. I don't need to compensate.
No, I don't. I don't want to get you demonetized here.
HHRs, my dad had 600K on it. Jesus, did he spend 40,000 repairing it?
Uh,
My buddy had one of those for his business. He does paintless dent repair and thought it would be cool to get the turbo one. And he's like, it
oh,
would rip the fan wiring and like melt it and overheat, and it had like every issue you could think of in the world.
yeah. So mine was just it was just the Ecotech. So I mean, it was a good motor, but everything else around it was yeah,
Any small Chevy is hot garbage, in my opinion. Hot garbage forever
yeah.
since like
They'll get
95 and up, right?
probably yeah,
Like the W body or whatever, the Cavalier, Lumina, all those, Corsica, those were like the most reliable in my opinion. Then the Cavalier, like the that Cavalier that looks like a helmet from people in Star Wars. Yeah, that is the most hot garbage car ever. Except for someone I work with had like a 250,000 on his and never had issues. And
oh yeah. I mean,
I'm like,
like
whatever God you're praying to, let me know because that thing shouldn't last that long.
yeah. I mean, get yourself a Buick with a 3.8, and that'll last. But yeah, it's been everything since then has been about downhill.
Oh, make Chris goes. Make sure your tow mirrors are out. Yeehaw!
Yeah.
You just screwed yourself talking about that belt big time. I've talked about it so much that if it was going to come out, it would, and I wouldn't be sad if it did. It owes me nothing. Stock clutch was going, and I slid on the ice and rode it off. About the HHR.
Nice.
Uh,
That's one thing that I liked about that car. It didn't have ABS for traction control.
oh, really? Not at all?
Yeah. I didn't know that when I bought it, but I was impressed.
You like stuffed the brakes somewhere and just slid 75 feet sideways?
Yeah, and I'm just like, where's the flashing light on my dash? Like what? But oh, okay, cool. Now I know what this can do.
The another one was Dream Cars, which is always a hard one for me to answer. You go ahead.
Uh, um so we'll start with the easy one, the third gen. So I had an 89. My first real project car was an 89 RS Camaro that I bought from a dude I knew in high school. I paid $300 for it. Um, had a blown head gasket. When I bought it, the passenger side cylinder head was sitting on the front seat. So it was legit. And he was like, yeah, I was thinking about like painting flames on it and putting a carbureted big block in it, like, third gen things. Um, and he's like,
Growing a mullet, throwing cigarettes in the back.
yeah. So, um, he, uh, he started preparing for that carbureted big block, and after he tore the engine apart, assessed the damage, decided he wasn't going to put it back together, he started preparing for a big block, and just started cutting wires. Well, that was also like headlights and turn signals and wipers and necessary stuff under the hood. And he's like, well, it's a wire under the hood and we don't need it anymore. So that car, I mean, in a very poorly way, I rewired that car from scratch after I built. I mean, I could have built 305 and a 700 R4 in it and had fun. Uh, but I mean, that was my very first. That's what started me on the path that I'm on now. I mean, I wired it with, like, the 10-foot rolls you get from O'Reilly, that kind of stuff, and just figured it out as I went. But I mean, it was a cool car, and then I rolled it. Um, Miraculously survived that. The T-top above my head popped out, but didn't break. Um, and I walked away from that accident with just a little bit of rash from the seatbelt. That was nuts. So then I got a 1992 anniversary third gen to replace it, swapped my drivetrain into it, drove that through college. Got rid of it when I had my first kid, just because of life. But I'd really like to do a pro touring third gen, like 90 to 92 body style, um, torn between red interior or doing something else, but just a nice, classy build, with maybe a small turbo and a 60/60. That's my bucket list car that I'll get to in a couple of decades. But
You should see. There's a car. The memory just came up not that long ago. My buddy Brett DeLong, uh, over 10 years ago, I think 11 on the Facebook memory, he was on my dyno with a carbureted 406 and a third gen. He's owned the third gen since high school. I think it was his first car also. So for the last 10 years, I have been on his case about throwing out the carbureted small block. And he finally did it like a year or two ago, right when the Terminator came out. And he built a 6-liter stock bottom end, but he put Summit pistons in it and to raise his compression and for a little bit of peace of mind, because he does nicer work than I do, admittedly. And he did a Gen 2 7875. It's a 6-liter, a Trailblazer intake, Terminator X, flex fuel, and the whole 9 yards. And it easily makes like 840 rear wheel on like only 17 pounds. And just the other night, he sent me a time slip from like last night, and I think he has a 980 at 89 miles an hour.
what?
He was on the brakes extremely hard.
Wow.
It went a 578 in the eighth at 125, and then he went a 980 at 86 in the quarter. So imagine how hard he was on the brakes.
Wow. Yeah. Just in that. Wow.
They were getting mad that he was going single digits and over 130, but the car, like the car on 6 pounds of boost goes a 1020, and on 13 pounds it goes a 920.
That's a step.
And then that's like a perfect combination if you were ever going to do a third gen. I'll have to send you pictures and videos of it. But
Noted.
we call it Don't
Yeah.
BS Me 2.0 because he took like my bottom barrel Don't BS Me style build and did like 25% more in a lot of areas. And it shows because the thing makes fantastic power, and it's been reliable now for 2 years going. Like I said, he was on the brakes there for most of the track and still went a 980, and that was like a pipe dream for him before. And it has a flex sensor and a Terminator, and he drives it to work, and he's like, it gets better mileage now than it ever has. And I'm like, yeah, dude, fuel injection shit's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not efficiency is and horsepower go hand in hand to a degree.
And he says the same thing. Like, he's like, man, this thing just bakes them off in high gear. And I'm like, yeah, dude, that's what 800 horsepower is, dude.
Yeah.
Not a joke 800 horsepower, but actually 800. Oh, smooth or chunky peanut butter?
Chunky. Chunky.
Does Jolt rework aftermarket harnesses or
No,
only
no,
make their own?
no, nope, nope, no.
You don't remake anything. It's new every time.
It's from scratch every time I buy all my materials in bulk. I don't even rework Holly stuff. I mean, everything I do is built from scratch and built here in house. So that's one thing I made a decision on right from the get go. Is even when I was doing a lot of stock ECU stuff, I don't rework truck harnesses just because. Um, I mean,
Too
again, a
many
harness is a
broken
harness.
and burnt things.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially if you're getting a harness out of a junkyard truck, like in this area particularly, where I mean, it's gone through how many heat cycles and salt and dirt and everything's brittle. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. I mean, even connector housings, they get brittle from the heat and break and um, yeah, just not. It's not worth it. The layout's not usually ideal. Um, there's just so much crap that you have to put in to have a result that's still half-assed, and so no, not a fan of that.
What are you a fluke meter kind of guy or a budget uh Lowe's or Harbor Freight style meter electronics guy?
No, I'm a Fluke guy. My go-to meter is a Fluke 902. It's actually an HVAC meter,
Yeah.
but it's pretty cool. I had to buy it for class in college, but the more I use it, the more I like it. I mean, it's got a temp probe that you can use, and it's very simple. But yeah, I'm big on like it's a data acquisition tool, so you don't want to skimp on that. I mean, just the other day, I did a house call for one guy locally, and he's got an E38 in he's doing an LS swapped old Chevy COE truck, so it's a pretty cool truck. Um, and I had Sidebar set up the ECU, and then uh, reworked. I'm backpedaling on myself, but he had a harness that kind of came with the project. It was not a factory harness. It was a harness from some company that's no longer in business. And there was two little things that I had to tweak on it. I tried to talk him into Terminator X, but it wasn't worth it. I mean, again, let's look at the best solution for what you got. Um, and so I did that, and then my other buddy that kind of was got the owner in touch with me and is kind of moderating things for us. He calls me. He's like, "Hey, we got the ECU put in, and it's powering up, but we don't have 5 volt reference at the throttle body. The pedal's not working. Like, we got problems." And I'm like, "Okay." So I did a house call because he's only like 15 minutes from me, and I go over there and I'm like, "Okay, so you don't have 5 volt at the throttle?" No. And so I take the meter that he's got, which is like a Blue Point. I mean, a decent meter, and so I check it, and yeah, no voltage. And then I go over to the ECU. I flip the ignition switch, it powered on, and so I knew our ECU was powering up, fuel pump primed. And then I tried reading voltage just at an ignition source, and was going 6, and then 18 volts, and then 5 volts, and 0. I'm like, okay, hold up. And then I go over to the battery, and I probe it, and I get nothing. And I'm like, okay, like what's going on here? And yeah, batteries in the meter were dead. So so yeah, I mean that's again good meter. I mean batteries were the issue there, but I mean that's the kind of issues you see with Menards meters, and I've fought those issues in the past too. So if you got something with that you're relying on for data, I try not to skimp there.
Uh, that was the top one here. Okay. This is a good one. What application specific tools do you have that people might not know about? Like you can explain to us or share with us.
Oh, I've got a pretty big arsenal of crimp tooling, and I'm still kind of a poor boy in that regard.
You're not Devin Vanderhoof yet.
No, I'm not. He passed me so quickly. Um, I it's so funny, and not to knock him on this, but I remember seeing in the comments of something he posted, someone's like, "Hey, would you wire my car?" And he's like, "Hell no, I will never wire cars professionally." And look at him now. And so I mean, he's figured it out, and so good for him. I've known Devin for a little bit, and I like the guy. I enjoy the conversations we have. We go back and forth and help each other out every now and again.
All you
Um,
wiring guys are best friends. That's what it's so cool about that community.
most of us.
Uh-oh. You don't have to say anything.
I won't, but the ones that actually like want to be friends are it's cool. So I mean, it's just one of those things where there's plenty of work out there. It's a big pond, so like why hate?
That's what they said too. It's there's so much work that there's no reason to not to be jerks and not help
there's
each
not
other.
there is not, and it's unfortunate that everybody doesn't understand that. But I digress.
That's what we
Um,
said about Troy. He's like, I would love to hire somebody that's not garbage. And we were like, guys, some of you get into it. And he said he would even do like apprenticeship and stuff like that. And I'm like, you want to make money and have a job you like, you want to wire cars all day. Here, every opportunity is here.
good help is hard to find, and I'm in a much better position where I can better utilize help because I've got like repetitive stuff that is more production than it is like race car wiring. And I've got a buddy that has been good, reliable part-time help that comes in and I mean just cuts and strips stacks for me and prep stuff that allows me to just go in and buzz stuff out and it's worked out really well. But no, I mean if I could find somebody like to groom as an apprentice type ordeal, I mean I would love that. I've got some ambitions to actually reach out to the high schools in my area and try some stuff. I think that'd be really cool.
It would be. That's how
Um,
I started doing my work.
is it
I
really?
did school to work and vote tech.
Nice.
Yep,
So yeah, I think it'd be cool to be a high school level Scott Clark.
of
Um,
course.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, I've tried some things with some kids for part time help, and it's hard to find somebody that gets the work and gets in a good groove because once they do, then they find something else to do or they've got other priorities.
Yeah, I
So
feel like it's tough when you're younger to know what you want to. It's hard to dedicate that. No offense or slight to any of those. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do or if I would stick with what I was doing or if I thought I was wasting all of. Because when you're young, they're like you're gonna ruin your life by choosing incorrectly, and you're like,
yeah,
okay, I'm 14 and I need to choose for the rest of my life, and I don't even know what I'm gonna eat for breakfast or if my friends are going to be my friends tomorrow. But I have to
I
choose my
know.
lifelong career.
Yeah, I mean, just yeah, and I mean the I was fortunate where the high school I went to, the industrial tech program was pretty decent. I mean, small town, so we had like FFA and stuff like that, where I mean that was in the community, but I mean you see a lot of that. Like everybody's going to high school for like college or death, and you've got like union plumbers that are making more money than teachers, and it's it's nuts. But that's I'm guilty of that big time. Like I've played both sides of things for a long time and was kind of sitting on the fence and for a long time. I mean, and I just got into that zone where I was trying to pander to that office job and then trying to keep this stuff going and you just can't half-ass two things and so you got to pick one and go for it. But
What was cool about all ad, I wish they would do after I went through Votech, I wish they would do it sooner because I hear in Europe you can get into trade schooling really early in schooling. And it wasn't available to me till like late in high school, which I after I went to it. There's plenty of kids. Votech gets a bad rap. There's kids that go to Votech because they don't want to do schooling, so they
mhm.
go to Votech, screw around, and then there's almost an unlimited possibility there where what was cool about what I did is there were quarters, so you could choose something, and if you didn't like it, you could line up another class. So you could do electronics, cosmetology, office work, welding. You could literally just keep choosing ones. There was no penalty at all. And then in your last year or two, you could choose something for the year full time instead of just hopping stuff. So I thought that was nice because you might be like, I want to weld. And then halfway through, you're like, this sucks. I don't want to do it. And you
Mm.
can go into like carpentry and you're like, I like this. I'm going to do this. So I thought that was the flexibility was cool because again, you don't know and then you're screwed and then you think you can't fix it. For a lot of people, by that point, they've already spent $100,000 on school and don't want to do it.
Yeah,
And then they just have too much obligation and have to follow through and hate their job and blah, blah, blah. So it's easier to make money when you aren't $100,000 in debt, also.
that is true.
Oh, Baytech. I think he's in Ireland or Scotland. He's signing off. He says it's 5 a.m. there. I better sleep. And he says, I wanted to be a dinosaur. And I said, my little guy wants to be a dinosaur. And then Killswitch says, I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up, and I'm 41. This guy says, as luck would have it, I am a dinosaur. Tell your boy there's no future in being a dinosaur. Ridiculous. I think you answered this by your tools, but people always ask solder or crimping.
Cramp.
Yeah, I have really adopted that. The last couple of years I focused on, it's funny to talk to wiring guys because I've really concentrated on. I never had problems with my wiring functionality wise, and I thought it was always funny to have like a hot mess that worked.
Mm.
My cars were reliable and it was like a spaghetti because I didn't care. But now it's relaxing to me to, and I think I'm learning. I never have foresight. Like I would lose all day in a chess game to an amateur because I can't think ahead. So it's tough for me to wire stuff because I can't plan ahead at all. And I'm like, oh, I'm adding wires. Oh, I'm adding wires. But Holly about 2 years ago gave me an entire set of like pinning and crimping tools. And
Mm.
now I learned where I used to cut and like plastic red butt connector everything till it worked. Now I can just like pull the pin and do it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is much easier. Like having a tiny tool that I can de-pin is way easier than putting 18 crimps on something that don't hold.
Oh yeah, 100%. So yeah, I've got a variety of hand crimp tools that I use, and there's definitely some black magic and fudge factor to it, and figuring out like what like because just like a lot of those crimping tools have multiple sets of dies, and just figuring out which one works best for what type of
Or
terminal. And
doing two stages is what I learned.
well, yeah, and there that is part of it, and there's a lot that factors into what is a good crimp versus a bad crimp. There most terminals out there have fact or manufacturer like recommended tooling. I found a really good set of Molex crimpers that kind of let me play the field on that. So they've got a really big variety of dies, and they work really well for like the GT150 stuff, the weather packs, or not weather pack, Metro Pack, the Super Seal 1.0 terminals that the Holly and Haltech ECU headers use, and
Tyco.
type yeah the
I call
Tycos.
them
So
Tycos because that's all I know them as.
yeah, TE Tyco, same thing.
Amp
But I mean, I
Seal,
could
that's a separate brand, right?
Amp Seal.
Yeah.
That's a series of connector
It's like a
that TE.
larger version of the Tycos.
Yeah, kind of like an economy graded
That's
connector.
why it's on Megasquirt stuff.
Yep. Yeah, I hate those. The locking on those is garbage.
It's
That's one
nice.
thing.
It's nice when they used to have RS-232 printer pins. The amp seal is much nicer, but yeah,
Yeah.
the Tycos are incredible. They're smaller. The locking positive is much nicer.
Hmm.
Everything is nicer. And then I got recently into DT connectors, as he called. Someone in here says, "Gotta love douche connectors." I call them douche connectors also. But
No,
yeah,
yeah,
those changed my life, especially the solid. I was crimping with like the open end, the V's.
the stamp terminals. Yeah, the
I bought
barrel.
I bought the Chinese connectors and it came with like those and it takes forever. And then what I learned is I'm like, why does everyone's barrel connectors look so much nicer? They're like the sealed or whatever. What's it called?
It's
A
a solid
solid
contact.
connector. And then I asked Troy Baum, what the hell? Because the crimpers are $250. I'm like, I'm not spending that to make crimping easier. He's like, buy these $33 ones. I use them more than my. So I bought it for like a 16, 12 to 16 or whatever, because that's the most common pin. And you drop the
Yeah.
pin in, and it stops, and you take the wire, and you're like, bam, crimp at the same time, and you're like, I'm done now.
Yeah, no, I've got the same set. So yeah, the actual Deutsch brand or the TE brand of crimper that will work with all three sizes of solid contacts.
That's what he was saying.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and to expand on that, it's not like a weather pack terminal that you see where it's got like the little U that your wire sits in and then the crimp folds in on it. It's a machine contact that's just a closed barrel, and so when the wire goes into it and then you crimp it, the actual crimper has like four fingers that pinch down on all four sides of your terminal, and it's a
yeah,
really
much more
good.
solid connection. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it
and
takes
they're
less leverage, and it holds it tighter, in my opinion.
yeah, and so I've got the same set of tools. I think they're Tool Aid brand, where it's just they're not adjustable, but I mean if you know what you're doing and you got an eye for it, you can tell like if you've got a problem. So yeah, I've got the three separate crimpers for the different sizes of terminals, but yeah, solid contacts for sure on all my DT and DTM stuff. Um,
I have grown to really love those because of the how easy it is to do the modular and take those apart. Especially, I was ruining them until I bought that the pry tool and the hook.
mhm.
That's if anybody wants to get into those details, I'll just grab them quick. You probably have them too sitting
Yeah,
around.
I'll grab mine too. Be right back.
We'll show them off.
Yeah.
Hey, we're back. I beat him. I beat him just because I'm closer to my. So this is like my most commonly used depinning tool, and it's got like it's just like a needle, and it hides in here so you can't poke yourself.
Oh yeah, you got the metric pack deepener.
This one, dude, this is like my lifesaver.
The, the,
I don't know how I existed without this thing.
I buy those things a dozen at a time because they're expendable.
Chris.
Snap them. I always tell I've got a kit actually. This was a recent one that I put together. I've got a kit for because I get a lot of people that ask me like, "Hey, I'm switching over to a 58 tooth engine," or I'm
Yeah, same ones, right?
yep.
What is it?
Um,
The
they're Tool Aid is the
Tool Aid
brand.
8880.
Yeah, that's the one I got in my hand too for the
It's like
16.
$33.
Yeah.
And then do you
So
have this guy? It's
I've
got
got
the
this
hook.
one.
Yeah, same thing. The hook and the
Same.
yep.
Yep.
This stuff save your life. And then they sent me these, which
Yeah.
crimp incredible. They look cheap too.
Yeah, and you've got those in hundreds of different variants, and the part number's worn off of it, but this is my go-to for crimping a lot of stuff.
Troy has that one too.
It's a Molex one, so yeah. So these are the big ones. I've got about a half dozen others, but those were the big ones I could grab quickly. Um, but again, that cutter stripper that thing saved my life. I bought it as a factory refurb. It cost more than my car at the time, but I think that thing has saved me from getting carpal tunnel before 30. So that was a really good investment. I'm glad that Jacob steered me towards. Um, that's really it for tools.
And then I'll ask like one or two more. I'm getting pretty whooped already.
We've burned some time pretty quickly.
We're at 3:21, 3 hours 21 minutes already.
Crap, time flies when you're having fun.
The only other one what do we got? Oh, this guy says I'm late. Yeah, it's a bad time. I was gonna ask about like blade fuses, or actually what I wanted to ask and I couldn't remember is someone was saying what's a common thing people do wrong in wiring that they don't know is wrong and you always have to tell them. So if you could educate people ahead of time to say don't ever do this, like the number one. And then another facet of that was they had asked, is there anything you want to ask people as potential customers, like why the hell do you do this? Or I think we went over where expectation is huge in taking on a wiring project. Like if you want Ryan to wire your car, you need to ask stuff ahead of time and not just bring him stuff he can't use or make it more expensive for yourself.
So your number one to that question is super easy. Soldering.
Everybody solders everything and don't do it.
I mean, it's got its place. Don't get me wrong. Here's my solder gun right here. So, I mean, there are places, but for 99.999% of the places in a race car, that's not it. I mean, soldering is for circuit boards. So the problem with soldering, especially if you don't know how to do it properly. So, I mean, if you do it right, okay, fine. But the thing about a soldered joint is it's brittle. It becomes brittle. And so if you're just doing inline solders in a harness that's not properly anchored and hanging, especially in a race car, like a nitrous car, or really any of them, I mean, you're going to have vibrations in that car of frequencies that you're not even going to be able to measure. And um, it it's just a joint that's waiting to fail. And the difficulty with them is when they fail, they might break, but then be held like in a spot where it'll go in and out of contact, or it'll pass the continuity check but not handle any current, and so you'll be seeing failures, and you're not able to chase them. And it's bad. So I mean, like if there is something that's necessary to solder, like in really niche weird cases, you got to be sure to one, anchor it, two, have enough of a safety loop to isolate it from vibration, and just do the soldering right. So, and a lot of people will when they do soldering, they'll have way too much solder in it, and that solder wicks up the wire and like past the insulation, and so that whole like 4 inches of wire on each side past your joint is like you're like, oh yeah, and you
It's
got
just
this
way
whole,
more work hardened.
it's just this big stiff brittle piece of shit that's just waiting to fail. And everybody like if I'm troubleshooting something, if somebody calls me with an issue, I'll be like, okay, well, like um
A lot of times too, people overheat stuff and then
yes.
make it brittle, and then like you said, have 4 inches of solder wicked, and then the leverage point on the weak, especially circuit boards, they overheat the pads, and then they have three
Mhm.
inches of leverage on a pad that's delaminated, and then that's it.
Yeah, and so yeah, people call me up, oh no, yeah, I connected all this stuff good, I soldered everything real nice, and I'm just like dying
Why?
inside to like, do I want to even go down this path? Like, yeah, that's the big thing
You
for
can be
me.
like, cool, bye.
Yeah, I can't help you. Um, no, other than that, as far as grooming customers for the kind of stuff we do, so like, and that was a big thing for me, is like when I started in this, I was just hungry to get into the industry. And because like I said, I grew up on a farm, and didn't wasn't necessarily sheltered, but kind of isolated. And so I didn't see a lot of this stuff until I kind of started carving out my own little path. And so I didn't grow up in a junior dragster or anything like that, like some of the people in the industry did. And and that's okay. I mean, I'm not complaining, but so like there's a lot of stuff that I had to figure out on my own. And like when I got into this, I was trying anything and everything and sticking my hands into a lot of stuff. And um it's taken some time to figure out what works, and just which people I want to weed out and tell no. And really, I mean, it simply comes down to the stock ECU guys. But
A lot of stock ECU bashing.
yeah, but I mean, I try to help it. Like the Fairmont guy, his car is going to be here probably in a few months, but he actually came up this morning just to check out the shop, check out my work, and make sure that it's what he wanted to do. And thankfully, he was happy with what he saw. Um, but yeah, so he asked a lot of questions, and I try to be proactive with every part of the build. Like what I don't like is when somebody comes to me last minute after like all the fab work is done and after and you can work through it and it's fine, but it's so much better. Like, and I'm happy to be a part of a build start to finish. So like when guys are at the chassis shop and getting stuff done, like we can kind of plan out where they want things mounted and where a panel's going to go. And so I can kind of help them be ahead of the curve and be like, okay, well, if we're going to put a panel like in the X bar in the door, like have your guy weld some tabs here. So that'll help me tremendously. Um, just stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah, it's just like doing a project on my end of work. You know, you want to be kind of asked before it happens and be involved so no one
Oh
gets
yeah.
screwed on
And,
both ends.
right. And no matter, I mean, like whether it's my car or not, that's something that I can be like I'm gonna push because I know we talked about it before. Wiring is always an afterthought. So like I've got
Someone
a car
mentioned that
here.
here, like it's the very last thing, and everyone rushes because they're ready. They're
Yeah,
ready to
and
start
it
the
is.
car, so they're just hammering and crimping.
And after they spent all this money on their engine and transmission and turbo, and then they bark at how much they got to spend on wiring
Oh
still, and then
man, thirty-two hundred
issues
dollars for a Dominator. Oh man,
for a $58,000 engine.
that's
That's being
fine.
cheap. Yeah, but and then when problems arise, the wiring guy is the first guy that gets finger pointed at him. But um,
And then it's been a mix of transmission and engine builder because everyone's not going to thrust at everything, but no one measured anything for either of those guys.
yeah,
So
yeah, I've been seeing that one a lot too. But but yeah, just to the point I was just about to make, like I've got a car in here that that was a chassis Model A Roadster, and I mean no expense spared on the car. Really cool car, fiberglass body, 427 small block in it. I mean that thing's gonna rip. But I mean, hardline for all the fuel system plumbing and lots of care and thought and effort put into like bulkhead fittings and tabs on the chassis. And then before the chassis was powder coated, and now I've got to run wires on stuff, and I'm cringing on drilling into a
you could put P clamps on like a painted powder coated chassis.
yeah, and zip ties, and just like this isn't right, and like yeah, so plan not only for your plumbing but your wiring as well. I mean, even if you're just welding little tabs on your frame, I mean, like there's nothing that kills me more than seeing a car, like you said, like that's I mean, just a full 25/3 chassis with a pro line in it, and then the wiring going to the front for the water pump and the headlights is just zip tied to the bar every 4 inches, and just uh,
Oh
but
well, I would say let me look through like one or two. I think this is it, which is fine by me. It's already 3 hours 30 minutes.
yeah.
Oh man, so I guess I'll call it here and just say thanks for being on. I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else learned a lot. And I appreciate you coming on the show and spending your time and sharing your knowledge and making fun of people when you can and whatever else
Well,
we can do.
it was a privilege, so thank you. I hope it was worth it. And yeah, more than happy to do it.
All right. Well, see you later. Everybody's saying good night. Yeah. Thanks everybody for tuning in and asking questions. Potato is the man of the hour or man of 3 hours or however long he was on. He's always rifling out the questions, right? Good and bad, but the bad ones are also good. But yeah. All right. Have a good one and good night, everybody. And see you on the next show. I don't know. I don't have anybody lined up, but you know, I'll let you know. Every other Saturday, I haven't been doing one, so we'll figure it out. Let you guys know.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. Thanks, everyone. Any questions that I can field beyond this? don't be afraid to reach out.
Yep.
That's all I got.
Email in and talk smack.
Yeah.
All right. Well, see you guys later. Good night.
Thanks, Matt. See ya.